Mark in the count. The swing arm now coming back as our countdown continues.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. If I'm playing my cards right, happy Sunday. But fun fact, I'm actually hanging out with the Toyleet Takeover folks. We got Ed from Action Figs over here, and we've got Travis, the Mr. Wonderful, to my left. Together, they are the Toyleet, a bunch of Toyleetist bastards, these guys. They started a newish show. How many episodes are you guys into it now?
We just hit 10, right?
Yep, just hit number 10.
We're doing this pre-recorded, so if you're in the chat right now during the premiere and you're like, answer my question, sorry, we're not gonna, because we're not that good. I am actually hanging out on the other side of the planet right about now. Woohoo!
And I will be in Joe Fest at this moment in time.
Perfect. And Travis will be at home sad.
Yeah. I'll be in the pool. I'll make sure I'm in the pool, guys.
He'll be in the pool.
Right.
Okay. Perfect, because you'll be Joeing it up and Joe Plus, really, because there's all sorts of cool stuff at that. That's basically going to be the Power Con of 2024,
absolutely.
Right?
Going to be a great show this year.
Today, since we are pre-recording, it didn't make sense to do a whole ton of like, hey, check out this new thing that happened, because it'll be a couple weeks old by then. But instead, you all just talked a lot about some figures that went from sort of comics to plastic. And there was a section in there, of course, about G.I. Joe. That got me thinking. I was like, man, I would really like to talk about that stuff, but as folks probably have figured out, that's not really my wheelhouse in terms of what I'm able to sort of collect right now. If space and budget were infinite, I probably would be getting a lot of the toys that we're going to talk about today, but I want to talk about them because I think they're really cool and look at them. So we're talking toy soldiers, military and military adjacent action figures, and you guys are much more experienced collectors of most of these lines than I am. So we about it?
Let's rock and roll.
Okay,
Sweet, man.
Even though we're not doing this live, I will still be putting together the document that's coming across right there at bit.ly/BrickSomethingNews. That takes you with the links from this show as well as every single episode of the Brick Something News. So there's also the QR code down by Travis's chin over there, so you can use that too if you're fancy. Let's go back a little bit. My toy story really begins with Star Wars. I was born into a house with Star Wars, and then there were a bunch of other 3.75 toys along the way. But as far as like the big properties and IP, it was Star Wars, and then it was G.I. Joe. Like, that was just the era. I was born in 76. By the time I was conscious and ready to play with toys, G.I. Joe was hitting shelves. So I want to start there. If we're talking, at least in my estimation, G.I. Joe is the patriarch of these military toy lines. Ed and I were talking before this, and really the term action figure gets created with this dude named G.I. Joe. This was the original, I think it was a toy fair in the 60s.
New York Toy Fair 63, 64.
Yep. This was the presentation that they were showing to retailers and everybody else that kind of pop up this new idea that a little company called Hasbro had.
G.I. Joe, reporting for duty, sir.
Since the beginning of time, children have always played soldier. With wooden swords, broomstick rifles, with cast lead soldiers, with plastic miniatures. But none of these had the ring of authenticity. None of these gave a boy the feeling that he was playing real soldier. Give a boy an Army field manual, and his fanciful imagination will carve reality out of thin air. To make a boy's dream come true, Hasbro is proud to present G.I. Joe, America's movable fighting man. The most realistic soldier anyone has ever seen. Imagine, G.I. Joe stands almost a foot tall. A soldier big enough to really play with. But look, G.I. Joe doesn't just stand. He kneels. He lifts his arms to fire a rifle. He can charge, or he can sit down and rest. He can throw a grenade or crouch in a foxhole. He can perform every...
They really leaned into this whole get a young boy, right? Obviously, different times, but the toy aisle was very much gendered.
That is where the term action figure came from, because they did not want these to be confused as dolls for boys. You know, it was 1964, so it was not cool for boys to play with dolls. That's why they coined the term action figure.
Yep, the way that presentation started, it's like since the beginning of time, they talked about swords, right? Knights and so on. And this notion of setting up play based on conflict, these things that kids were probably pretty aware of. You know, the funny thing is this is also during the 60s, and the United States was about to get entangled in a pretty long war, which
the U.S.
affects
got
the
involved
toy
about
line.
a year after this line started, actually.
Yep.
65. The cool thing is Don Levine, who created this, G.I. Joe, he was the guy that created it based off of one of those old wooden mannequins that they use for art. And then, of course, borrowing from Barbie's marketing and razor and blades marketing concept, right? Which is you sell the razor, then you just keep selling the blades, generating money over and over and over again, which is where you get the standardized figure with all the uniform and equipment sets, right?
Perfect shot right there. Perfect timing, because you sell them the doll, and the doll needs some uniforms and some accessories and everything. So
Action
that
figure.
Action figure.
It's an action figure. It's not a doll.
Okay. 2024. It's a doll.
Anyway.
No,
So you know, Don Levine got actually access to military archives for blueprints. So these weapons and gear and all the stuff was designed after legit military equipment. They launched it, and it was a huge success. I mean, gigantic success. There's a cool picture that was like in a lot of the old, like, you know, Boys Life magazines, things like that, right? And it's got like...
Real quick, I just want to share with people, Boys Life was a magazine that was actually specifically published by the Boy Scouts organization, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the magazine, and yeah, talk about perfect place to advertise. I hadn't even thought about that, but like, you've got these kids who are scouts, right?
Yep.
Very much learning, very military, like, you know, I did this. You like that? That's how much of a nerd I am.
There was actually
is it this? Is it this? Be prepared.
It was Be Prepared, and then it was this. This was
balloons
the
at this
and
point.
then
Hold on a second. A scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Right. Holy crap, the garbage is in my brain. Yep. Sorry. But it's
many years.
Garbage. Yeah.
Many years saying that pledge.
Okay, so that totally makes sense. And of course, I just share that because that's also part of the zeitgeist, right?
Yep.
And that's 60s. I was born in the 70s, but it continued. Yeah. And this is very much how, I mean, literally the magazine is called Boys Life. Yeah. And so it became this, the market was like predefined and predisposed to almost like eat this stuff up.
Yeah, right. And back then, the Boy Scouts was originally created to get boys ready to go into the military. I mean, that was the whole purpose, right?
Yep.
So this was a perfect place, but they had a cool advertisement. And like I was saying, in the 50s and 60s, you know, a lot of fathers and sons would build the train layouts. So in the advertisement, they had a father and a son, and the dad, you know, of course, had the sweater on with the pipe, you know, and instead of a train layout, like on an 8x4 table, they had like a dio of like a battlefield, right? With the trenches and the barbed wire. And the slogan said, "A new kind of fun for father and son." I just thought it was like, I just love that whole thing, right? It was like,
it's fascinating because it's like the implication there is like war, and it's like a new kind of fun. It's engaged in armed warfare and deadly battle. But like hearing everything that we've talked about, what's coming to mind in terms of the G.I. Joe and the sort of action figures that you knew?
Yeah, so for me, I do remember these, but largely in part because my dad was like one of 3 boys in a 10-kid household.
Okay.
So you know, he and his brothers did have a lot of these growing up. So when I was a kid collecting toys, again, I leaned towards wrestling, but was hard to find them. So I would fall into things like Joe's and things like that and whatnot. And then Sergeant Slaughter was in there in the early 90s, right? So, you know, for me, pro wrestling overlapped with G.I. Joe, which pulled me right in because Sergeant Slaughter. So that was huge for me. But I do remember these 12-inch ones because when I was playing with the smaller scale 3 3/4 stuff when I was young, my dad would laugh and go, "Oh, when I was a kid," because he was
real Joe,
right? Because my dad was born in 60, so he was right at the prime age at 67, 68. He would have been sitting there grabbing these, and from his older brother who's a few years older than him, and passing down to his younger brother who's a few years younger than him. But I never had them, but I remember my dad picking on me and talking, oh, they had uniforms and they were great. And I'm like, okay, Dad, these are way cooler. You know, these got rubber bands inside them. They're way cooler. So, yeah.
And, you know, in hindsight, your dad was right. And the reason I say that is because I look at this and I'm like, yeah, there's this, it is a world and it's huge. You know, like when I think about scale, like imagine being a kid and being immersed with this gigantic soldier, and you can totally dress them. Like that's a thing that, like, and I go back to the quote unquote girls aisle, right, with Barbie. What that allowed you to do was kind of like you truly were envisioning yourself in this pretty generic character. In this presentation, they shout out that they found a composite of 20 real world sold people. You know, and it's like that's kind of fascinating.
But you know, they use a basic face like Barbie did, right? So you can pretend that's not, you know, the guy you're seeing on TV. That's not the actor. That's not, you know, it is a generic face, and you can become that guy, which is a great concept.
This was just a presentation of an idea for a toy line. Like, how many waves are they implying with this presentation? That literally was a kickoff, right? Like, that's wild. And so this is before the internet, before the computer. All of the stuff you're seeing are actually things that someone put together and they filmed and edited. So this took a lot of work to put this presentation together. And I look at like the boxes, like they had art for the boxes and they had to mock those things up. They had each one of those illustrations. That's not something you do real quick, right? No. And so that was somebody with probably some Bristol boards, some inks, pen, and was like doing the whole thing.
When they first brought this to, when the marketing team for G.I. Joe first brought this to the Hassenfeld brothers and the other bigwigs at Hasbro, they actually had the character's name. Like the action soldier was actually going to be called Rocky, and then the pilot was going to be called Ace, and I can't remember what the other two were going to be called, but that's when they decided, let's not give them names, let's just call them what branch of service they belong to, so anybody can be anybody, right?
Yeah, the notion of a G.I. Joe, right? It's a, you know, generic soldier. And then again, I just want to come back to this. Like, check, that's crazy. It's like, now they didn't say like, oh, we have plans for a bunch of accessories. They're like, no, let's mock it up. Let's put them in these boxes and let's film it all. And just look at that. Like, that is probably something that would come out across several waves now, right?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But back in the day, right, you could go into the store. I remember going to the store in the 70s and they still had some of the Adventure Team stuff laying around. And the rack, you know, there's spinner racks and shelves just full of, you know, different things. I mean,
well, it looked like a Barbie aisle, I assume, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. So then,
and that wasn't a slight by any means.
Sure. Take it back to the doll, Travis. That's all right.
So then it catches on, and part of the reason it catches on is because of commercials. Again, this was a time for the kids. We had a handful of channels. We had this thing that we all gathered around and watched together in real time with our families and other kids, right? And we knew that if I was watching something on this thing called a television, the house next door, if they had a TV, and houses all around, were watching the same thing at the same time, because everything was synchronous, not asynchronous. No streaming, not on demand. If something was showing, it was shown. And frankly, if you missed it, you wouldn't. You just missed it. And so with that said, like, even the commercials become events. That's a weird thing for people to realize, but like, people watched advertising. So I'm just going to show one commercial here.
G.I. Joe, fighting man from head to toe, on the land, on the sea, in the air. Look at all that G.I. Joe equipment. Boy, I'm going to get a tent, a machine gun, 2 machine guns with sandbags and rifles, too. I'll build a combat scene with maybe 4 G.I. Joe soldiers with helmets and .45 caliber pistols. Dad says all the G.I. Joe equipment is authentic. That means just like real. Look at that frogman, a complete scuba suit. And I'll get the life raft and the Navy life jackets. For the pilot, they've got high-altitude helmets and air vests, too. And everything for the Marines is camouflage. And a G.I. Joe footlocker with different compartments so you can keep uniforms and equipment in it. What would I like? Just more G.I. Joes and more G.I. Joe equipment.
And you know that guy grew up to like try and track all this stuff down like us. right? So that's the beginning, right? The advent of the toy commercial,
Yep.
and like just showing off the whole line. And this is what you were sort of describing, right? Hey,
Yeah.
Dad, let's play, right?
Yep.
Which
That's
fun.
me today with Son of Wonder, with my Savage Crucible or my Joe's.
Yeah.
As soon as I see an announcement, I'm like, dude, did you see this? And I know he didn't because he doesn't follow it like I do. And I'm
Yeah.
like showing him, but that's the same way. I'm like, and look what you can do with the stuff.
Yeah. That
So, yeah.
advertisement I saw is probably these two guys, this guy and this boy, because the
Okay.
display looks almost the same, except the guy standing there, with this atypical pipe for the father back then. He got home from work and lit up his pipe, and that's where it said, like, new kind of fun for father and son building this war dio, right? It's like,
Yep. And it's funny because it's like, and of course, every father was spending this kind of time with their
Right.
kids, right?
Yes.
Not with a six pack in front. But anyway, what's funny is like fast forward to today, right? It's like, let's make dios. Oh man, I want to build a world. Gee, I wonder where we got that idea from.
Yep.
Right. Like, and so again, this was the 60s, and we'll get there, but this didn't end here. Let's fast forward to times change. Ed and I kind of hinted
1969 hints, and people are
Yep.
upset about war toys being made and being sold
Yep.
to kids. So
huge anti-war movement
Yep.
all over across the country. Obviously,
that's when
like
the hippies start, taking over, right?
you got your hippies, you got your yippies, you
Yep.
got other folks fighting for black liberation,
Yep.
civil rights, queer rights,
your-
Stonewall happens, all of
Yep.
it, right? It's
Yep. All that's
converging at the
going
same
on at
time,
once. Yep.
feminism. And so it's a radical shift. And then there's this question of like, how do we continue to sell
In
these
the late
toys?
68 and early 69, the G.I. Joe sales from the toy stores and from the retailers actually had started to decline because of it. So that's when Hasbro decided that, hey, this is still a popular thing, but we just need to shift its direction.
Here, let's take a look at that era. There's a little bit of rebranding too.
The new G.I. Joe adventure team.
Oh, it's the flocking.
Rugged men with light-like hair. They're outfitted for action, and they take their orders from this man, the adventure team commander.
I got a tough assignment for you.
The G.I. Joe adventure team. They'll dare anything and risk everything. Collect the new G.I. Joe adventure team and add to the action with adventure team sets. G.I. Joe, now with lifelike hair from Hasbro.
So, funny story, the lifelike
This
hair
is the rugged
started in 1970, and it was actually something Palitoy, which was England's version of G.I. Joe, actually created. They had the flocked hair before Hasbro did.
Nice. Yep. And again, you probably noticed that is the adventure team, right? And so a stolen idol, and they're like, oh no, deadly snakes involved.
Yep.
Right. But it was the play pattern changed too, right? So it's funny, we didn't mention this, but the original G.I. Joe didn't really have enemies. It was always sort of an implied other, right? Like an implied enemy.
So in 67, they came out with the G.I. Joe foreign soldiers, which were originally designed to be the enemy, right? They had Japanese, they had Russian, they had German and Nazis. And they were like, oh, that's not going to go over well. So then they just became the foreign soldiers collection, right?
Yeah.
Same people, but they just made it. And all the kids were using them as the enemy because they all grew up during the time when, Japan was the enemy and Russia was the enemy and Germany was
we were interning people here, the Japanese in the camps, and it was horrible. Yep. And that was the sign of the times. And we wonder why some kids kind of grew up with certain attitudes. But hey, that's how things develop. And so we start to see the idea of adventure, not necessarily combat, mixed in, which we will again later see these patterns start to develop, and the mixing of sort of genre and style and play pattern.
So one of the things Hasbro really wanted to key in on in the adventure team was that the adversary was nature, whether it was a raging river or a crocodile or a snake or whatever, and then just scientific discovery, right? That was basically what they really wanted to key in on, so they could get completely away from that aspect of an enemy or a war.
But I just want to point out vehicles, right? So they did have stuff like that in, but they had play sets. But am I right that they didn't really have?
They had a couple of Jeeps. They had a desert Jeep. A couple versions of the military Jeep with a trailer that had a cannon on there, and a couple Irwin, which was not Hasbro, released like a police motorcycle and a couple other things, but Hasbro basically only had the Jeeps.
Got it. And so by the time we get to this area, you got that copter, which if you didn't catch, had a little lever that you would press and it would turn the rotors, and it had a winch. Kids love a good winch, right?
That's right.
And then we get to this, and you're like, all of a sudden, like these funky and cool little, like that little motorcycle that you
play features became huge. Yep.
Oops. Yep. No, totally. That you create the drag bike, you construct it and put it together, and he's like leaning over, and then you've got this backpack copter thing. That's
so
dope.
In this set they had some pretty cool things, because they had a backpack that had a inflatable wrap that tucked into the backpack, and then on each side you had lasher straps that held onto a paddle that you could put together, and then there was also an escape car that was like a little go-kart that Joe carried on his back and put together to escape. Right, pretty cool.
Yeah,
stuff.
and I look at this stuff. I look at like this, the predecessor of the jetpack.
You got to remember too, during this time there were shows coming out like the $6 Million Man and things like that, right? That were having like, you were seeing a lot of commercials with guys using like jetpacks that weren't really, they really didn't exist.
And then we get to what you were moving towards is like, okay, great, kids are having fun with nature, but conflict, right? We got a good guy in Joe. We need a bad guy. Is that where you were going?
Yep.
So break it down, and I'll mute this and I'll just play it.
So they came out with these guys, which were the alien Neanderthals that were supposed to be the strong men from an alien planet. And G.I. Joe got an eagle eye feature. These guys were called the
Invaders.
Yep.
Oh, Intruders. Sorry.
Intruders. Yeah. I knew it was something like that. But these guys, strong men from another world. Yep. They were Joe's enemy, right? And Joe became the Super Joe Adventure Team, which he got the Eagle Eye G.I. Joe Commander and Bullet Man, which was based off of a 40s comic book, and Mike Power, which was Hasbro's original attempt at the $6 Million Man, which they lost the license to do. So they came out with Mike Power.
So, question. I didn't know this. This is new to me. This guy that looks like a mix between the LJN wrestling figures with some really busted articulation, almost like the early 90s Hasbro. They're not the LJNs, but they had those other ones. I can't think what they're called. But the retro style. Like, what was the reason for the different sets of articulation? Vastly different.
Yeah, I think that my belief is, and this has never been confirmed, I believe that the Intruders, the figures were designed for something they were going to come out with. Hasbro needed an enemy for Joe, right? So why would you come out with a guy that's like 8 inches tall to be the enemy of Joe that looks vastly different other than the head, right? I mean,
so it was like a failed attempt, and they're like, well, we already produced all this crap.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Just throw it out there as Joe's enemy. Okay, interesting. Man, the world. The stories that could be told for being a fly on the wall in those rooms.
Oh,
we screwed that one up.
Yep, exactly.
But let's recycle it, and I'm sure they sold a ton of this.
And
right?
Joe also, in between there, in 73, I want to say 72, 73, came out with his Kung Fu grip, which got carried through the rest of the line. Even to this day, it's still talked about the Kung Fu grip.
Yep. We lost the side eye, the mighty side eye. No, the eagle. What was it? Eagle eye.
Yep.
Yeah. We lost that.
Feature. That is really cool feature.
That's creepy.
Yep.
That is a creepy feature. I mean, it's cool, but it's creepy. Yeah. I could imagine doing some really
the comic
cool
book pages that would go into like magazines and stuff to advertise this. Joe was in his helicopter and he was able to see, everything, and he spotted the intruder down on the ground, like in, the deep jungle, because he has this eagle eye. He can see everything,
Right.
That was the whole marketing concept behind it.
Was Planet of the Apes around at the time when this?
Oh hell yeah!
Came out in
the
60s. Dude.
It was.
Was it a really failed attempt at those toys or something?
I mean, honestly, it was in the zeitgeist. By the time you had Planet of the Apes, you had, as you mentioned, $1 Million Man, and $1 Million Man was going up against cavemen or Bigfoot and
all sorts of enemies,
robot cyborg people, all sorts of stuff. And so
everything was. This is after Star Wars. You got to remember, this is after Star Wars. Like at the same time, Star Wars was getting hot, right? So there's a lot of space stuff involved, right? And that's where
makes sense.
And they make it real clear, man. The Intruders are the enemies of the G.I. Joe. And of course, you get your Marvel comic tie-in. Here's the original box. Look at that. And then
Yeah, this
Boom.
is it right here. See the eagle eye in the helicopter, and I think
It's G.I. Joe against the intruders, the
Yep.
enemy.
that was another cool helicopter, the capture copter, that was designed exclusively for the Super Joe Adventure Team to be able to capture the intruders. And they had a huge vehicle that was the trapper that had a cage you could put your intruder in the back.
So this was actually 1976. So this is a year before Star Wars would break.
Yeah.
But, well after like Ape Mania has gone on since
$6 million
almost
Man
a
is on-
decade. And so, and even then I was chips, right? Like cops, California Highway Patrolman, so it was like all of that was kind of in the air. There was stuff in there. Okay. So then we get to fast forward the 80s. And so at this point, we were talking about, these guys that were much larger toys, 12-inch. There's the oil crisis. Plastic gets expensive. What do? We scaled down. And then there's all sorts of fun.
That's where the Super Joe line came in, right? Because they needed to scale it down. And then, of course, they were all hoping that, the oil crisis wouldn't, impact the market forever. But then go into the 80s and everything has to get scaled way down. That's why the Eagle Force by Mego were actually made out of metal because of the oil crisis. It was easier and cheaper to stamp figures out of metal than to cast them in plastic at that point in time.
So now we've got the basic setup, and you can see what happens when they say, "Hey, let's bring this legacy IP back in a new toy form." Kenner, right, famously like won the Star Wars license and kind of took over that size. There were obviously other figures out there of that size, like the Fisher Price Adventure People, which is a whole other rabbit hole that folks should know about because it's glorious.
Yes.
But then Hasbro's like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? They go back to their legacy IP and they say, hey, let's do this. And we sort of saw that Intruders Marvel comic tie-in. They kind of use some of that magic to give us this. So you'll notice this commercial that came out might visually seem familiar, the music might seem familiar, but then wait till the end.
She's been kidnapped by Cobra. We have no alternative. Call in G.I. Joe.
Fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. He never gives up. He'll stay till the fight's won. G.I. Joe.
Who's leader of the Joe team? Hawk.
He's America's best. He's in control. He's a man.
Good luck, Joe.
He lives his days. The legend of G.I. Joe.
The Legend of G.I. Joe. New from Marvel Comics.
So we got a Marvel Comics issue #1 TV commercial, and my brother was on it. Like he was on it, and he was like, "We need this. This is the new thing we're gonna do." And then, of course, shortly after that, you get.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there.
It's here, the G.I. Joe collection. Infantry Trooper, codename Grunt. Bazooka Soldier, codename Zap. Mortar Soldier, codename Short Fuse. Laser Rifle Trooper, codename Flash. Ranger, codename Stalker. Communications Officer, codename Breaker. Machine Gunner, codename Rock and Roll. Counterintelligence, codename Scarlet. Commando, codename Snake Eyes. Each sold separately. G.I. Joe from Hasbro.
And then you can even see there all the sort of Deke animation, the beginning of what we all will come to know as G.I. Joe, Real American Hero. The theme song is there, like everything is in place, right?
The cool thing is that even back in the 60s, right? And then moving on to this G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, Hasbro was always at the forefront of trying to introduce females into an action figure line.
This is true.
During the military, they had the G.I. Joe Action Nurse, which was a failed disaster because she had a sculpted ugly face. I mean, which, just was horrible, decision making, right? But it was a very unpopular character, because it was a girl in a boy's line, and B, because she just looked horrible. She's probably one of the most expensive Joes you can find nowadays. But then when they came out with the Real American Hero, even during the toy launch, they had a female character in their toy line, which was unheard of.
Yep. Scarlet, judging by the face, you might not be sure but yeah, no, it was a cool thing. You're right. And then famously they added that last figure at the very end of the wave And how do we get one more figure in? And they got Snake Eyes in there because he could no paint, cheap, right?
Yep.
And there he is, and A Star Is Born, right? And the rest is history. All of this stuff I put together in a playlist, and obviously other folks have plenty of other playlists, but this is just the easiest way rather than dropping every single link to the videos. But if you go to this playlist, you'll see that G.I. Joe Toy Fair presentation video. You'll see that those early commercials. There's a bunch more. It's fascinating stuff, just toy history, even like U.S. history, really. Like, oh, I didn't even show this, but check out this toy, Travis.
Oh yeah,
that's some like Joy Toy.
I feel like I've seen that right there. Yeah, I feel like I've seen something like that.
The back actually separates from the front, so you can have a scout vehicle and then a command center. It has lights and a spinning satellite dish, maps that pull out, doors that open up, chairs, computers, all that stuff.
Can you imagine if Classified came out with this as sort of like a HasLab?
That'd be awesome, dude. That'd be awesome. It'd be a good year for it. The 60th anniversary year, right? It'd be a good year for it.
So just a couple quick resources for folks to check out. You know, you get these cool shots of just like pure hits of nostalgia. You can see all the figures broken up by a year. And you can go through those and all the way through 2018.
What was the first 3 3/4 inch Real American Hero figure you got?
My first was Zap.
Mine too.
Thumb broke pretty damn quickly trying to get that bazooka in his hand.
Mine that I remember was it was a Cobra character, and I can always forget the name. It's the orange one they just did like a year or two ago.
That'd be the Alley Viper.
Alley Viper, yep.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't think of it. Thank you, Alley Viper. Yes, that was like the first one I remember having at home and owning it.
They needed an enemy. So this is the creation of Cobra, and also other factions that were hinted at that were a part of Cobra, like, you know, Destro the enemy. The original cartoon was like G.I. Joe against Cobra and Destro. And then later we get all these sorts of factions, right? Or I guess like units or teams, like
sub-teams,
right, with Tom X and Zayman at the head, and then you get the Dreadnoks. But they all kind of had this playing with genre, I guess is where I was going with that. So it was like, yes, you had the military Joes, but then you had mad scientists like Dr. Mindbender that they were going up against, or the Dreadnoks that were like this, like riffing off like post-apocalyptic / punk rock / you know, and then you still had the DNA of the adventure team of like the, you know, first responder kind of things. And it's really cool to kind of see it all evolve. Like, look at these two, man. And surprise, surprise, this kind of stuff tended to be my favorite. The military stuff I was into, like, it was cool, but there was that influence of just like kind of out there fantasy, I guess, for me. My brother was super into the military side, so
I loved the Dreadnoks when I was a kid. They were my jam.
And then you got into, as I kind of alluded to, when Cobra was struggling. They needed to build an enemy, an ultimate enemy, the Cobra Emperor, and take the DNA from all these different, you know, conquerors throughout history. Fascinating sci-fi stuff, all until you get to like, at a certain point, it's like, I was about to say they're running out of ideas, and that's not fair. I mean, I think if anything, they're just constantly generating and iterating.
I think they were trying to keep up with the ever-changing landscape of toys and cartoons at that point in time.
True. And so you got guys like the Iron Grenadiers or Grenadiers. People say Grenadiers. I've always said them as Grenadiers. I don't know. That's what I've said, Grenadiers, but a lot of the people talking about the Classified that were just announced are saying Grenadiers. But like full-on Darth Vader mixed with the Nazis, which I realize is Darth Vader and the Empire. But and then you've got, you know, your ninjas, and you've got dude who carried around a hammer with a cinder block on the end of it.
Road pig.
And it got super weird / fun. I remember towards the end, I think one of the last Alley Viper.
Yep,
there he is, right there.
Top. Boom. And yeah, no, he's a standout, man. I remember because he had
I
that
know.
cool visor.
This is when they came out with the big space stuff too, right? The
This
big
is when
tank.
I would have really gotten into it because I would have been about
Yeah.
5 at this point. And I know I got the Slaughter from this because that would have been like my tie-in.
The Slaughter Marauders.
Wrestling.
Yeah, I would have got, yep.
The Slaughter Marauders
no,
was just announced by Classified for.
That's what I was gonna say. We'll go down here, so
figures.
we'll get to Classified next. But yeah, you can see where these things are pulled from. So it's funny because in the 80s they were pulling from the stuff from the 70s and the 60s, the notion of having an enemy, a fictionalized enemy. But at the time in the 80s, they were looking at, yes, a fictionalized enemy, but what are some tropes and some ideas that we can use to create these enemies, whether that's the KKK, right, or some terrorist organizations in general, other terrorist organizations. In addition to the KKK. Yeah, I said it. It's true. And then, but you've also had like the Scottish arms dealer and who else? The Baroness, who for some reason had the she's a Baroness and this very Eastern European amalgam of an accent, right? Oh, and
she was definitely based off of like the James Bond espionage thing that was going on really big, right? Big back then.
Yep.
Right?
And then by this time, they're starting to do repaints and building these teams of Sergeant Slaughter's Marauders, which is the SDCC exclusive, or no?
No, it's just a Hasbro.
It's just a Hasbro.
Hasbro exclusive.
Yeah. And then we get into like Battle Force 2000 when they're competing with like Transformers, and I think that's I don't even know what year that would have been, but so they got real sci-fi. So this is again
they had their drug enforcement agency, which was during that whole time of say no to drugs for
Reagan. Drug abuse resistance education. Thank you, Nancy Reagan. Yeah, totally. And
that frying egg commercials just burned into our brains.
I remember that. I had that Cobra. I love that one.
This is your brain on drugs. Yeah. And then you had Cobra Commander, who for some reason now needed battle armor. You had Croc, Croc Master, who had the coolest like Beastmaster eyeball on his belt. Raptor, right?
Crystal Ball
guy. Crystal Ball. Yeah. This guy, I remember this Psych Out with his weird little like weird contraption with a radar dish, but like I guess they were like ultimately they were like some weird what do you call that? That like the CIA and NSA playing with like
they were doing that, right? That movie, The Man Who Talked to Goats, was legit stuff that the CIA was doing, right? Giving people LSD trips and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like
or using
we're done.
Radio waves, microwaves, all that stuff. But yeah, here you go. Battle Force 2000 with vehicles that kind of combined. Wink, wink. Transformers, Voltron,
Transformers, Mask.
So anyway, this was yojo.com, but also just if you're into the cards, definitely check out actionfigure411.com, which is
that's a great site.
Oh, look at that. That's just the art, the painting, everything, right? Like I love this artwork. This was my childhood.
It's kind of cool because in the Hasbro Yojo June Pulse they did yesterday on YouTube, Lenny talked about how he was so excited when they finally did the retro versions of the classifieds because he got to go back to the card flash.
Yeah.
Which was huge for all of us, right? Back in the day, right? I mean, the card flash was a big deal.
Remember, and then these guys, again, this is the time of video games. Yeah. Like I was taking these guys and playing Contra and Karnov with these guys just because like that's what they were competing against. Like literally
that was Slaughter's first team.
Yep. They were competing with me wanting to play NES now with my friends. Yep. And so it was a different time. Then we get to fast forward. All those folks like us who collected that stuff, loved it, missed it. G.I. Joe never went away. There was always something being made, whether it was just continued like sort of new takes on the Real American Hero stuff or the, new stuff, G.I. Joe Extreme, as you were mentioning earlier.
There's only from 64 till 24, this is their 60th anniversary. There's only a few years where there wasn't G.I. Joe product actually on the shelf, which is impressive.
And I remember when Classified hit. So now this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time today because this becomes a launching point for like finally get to the rest of the stuff. But this is the foundation, right? G.I. Joe really truly was this pivotal IP that set the foundation for action figures in general, the sort of like play pattern of combat with an enemy and factions and repaints and all of that stuff. I really like, because Star Wars didn't do it because there was a clear established lore that like you were going through Lucas's brain, right?
Very
But
hard coded to Star Wars,
yes,
right?
this
Where
was
Joe
like
opened.
Yeah, it's like we could repaint the guys and put them into Sergeant Slaughter Squad or Tiger Force.
The Fisher Price Adventure people really started that whole process, and then they died out in '83, basically. And Joe carried that whole let's repaint it, give these people lots of vehicles, and just keep going with it.
And so when this came out, it was mixed. A lot of people were not happy with sort of like the way things were rolled out with like some of the designs of the characters or the loadout, right? What's this laser gun? And why do they all have Joe Pros, these cameras on them? And so it's funny because it's pretty quick when they even started to return to figures that were released and kind of like until it becomes this process of really fine tuning and getting to a place where I think people were like, yes, this is a great line. And more and more they hit a kind of a critical mass. The line is absolutely thriving. And I've said this, I don't collect Joes. I don't collect Joe Classified. And I look at my brothers all the time and they're really cool. For me, Joe Classified is really like, I think it's even like surpassed Marvel Legends in my brain for like the strongest Hasbro.
It's definitely the strongest Hasbro line right now. And they're, thanks to competition in the market, Hasbro has improved G.I. Joe's quality and designs and the money they're investing in the packaging and everything over the last few years of the line. So, I mean, it's a good thing, right?
And it's amazing to say that because you're talking about Hasbro, who makes figures for some of the biggest IP, whether that's Star Wars and Marvel, two of the largest. Like, it's weird, I would say, in the mass market pop cultural world, those are much stronger IPs
for sure.
than G.I. Joe. Like, most people are like, what? And yet in the toy collecting space, like by far G.I. Joe is the strongest among the Hasbro things. And we're talking, they had Power Rangers, right? They had it all. And but
I will say Marvel Legends has picked up their game over the last couple waves, right? But for a long time, it was just the same old, and everybody was getting sick of it, right? And of course, you didn't have MCU, really being out there like it was for the, Captain America and Endgame and all those movies, right?
Well, let me just
Joe
say
is doing some really good stuff. So I mean, you can't.
Let me say that I say that it's the strongest, but like, Marvel Legends are no slouch. Those are really cool figures as well. So, but it speaks to like what Hasbro's capable of, but also when they hit their stride with an IP that clearly people want more of.
And I think what you're trying to get to, right? I think what you're saying is that when you compare MCU and Marvel to the Joe IP from a global brand and recognition, you would expect a lot more out of that Marvel brand than you would the Joe, because Joe is, it's owned by Hasbro. It's limited to what Hasbro puts behind it. So you don't get it, but it is always, it's pushing the boundaries of what they do, and they're evolving it. They came out with a classified line when it first came out. And it was very much, I saw it right at the beginning of COVID, hard to find. And I wanted more things to fill my closet and my collection with, but I went after them, even though they weren't like, again, I wasn't a diehard as a kid for the Joes. So I wasn't so stuck in my way of, it's not classic enough for me. I liked it. So I got into it. I love the term classified because in my mind, I'm like, as they've turned that corner and up their game, it's classified, but it's classic with a modern twist. So I love the name classified for it. Exactly. That's exactly the way I look at it when I hear it every time. Like, because it's got a modern, spin to it, and it gives you that revamped feel. It's got that 12-inch versus the 3 3/4. So on a shelf, you can see it. You can see all of that really cool deco to it. They've done a great job with it.
I think the other thing with classified is, though, like as far as that being so well appreciated now, is that the guys that are working on the Hasbro line, like Lenny and the other guys, right, absolutely love G.I. Joe. So they're huge fans themselves. And they don't have to go to Disney, Lucasfilm, or Marvel and say, is this okay to do, right? Is this design going to work, right? This is the design we came up with. This is what the figure looked like back in the 80s. This is what it looks like now. We're going with it, right? So there's not that approval process, which I think like, I think that causes some delays and some design.
Yeah, it absolutely
issues,
does. Tom Holland, Chris Evans, they have to see this stuff before it's,
Right.
They've got approval processes to make sure they're happy with their likeness and stuff. And, Disney has their locks on it. It's just more red tape to get through.
Yeah.
So it totally makes sense why they can put more behind this and drive more to the original, toy line.
As an outsider who isn't collecting these currently, and obviously if it wasn't clear, like I have a toy foundation with G.I. Joe. I am completely blown away by the classified line, even just scrolling through this, right? And I think this is my plea to maybe a little bit more sanity and gratitude amongst the Joe fan base. Again, totally an outsider, not trying to condescend, but just if you look at this, and you look at the process they've gone through to kind of get to a sweet spot. Things take time, right? And so I remember some of the chatter in the beginning, the frustration, the anger, right, that people had. But like it takes time. That they're gonna make some things that you don't like, and then some things that you like, and they retool and readjust. And I look at the evolution of this, and I'm.
But if you look at the original G.I. Joe in the 80s, right? I mean, the first 12 figures were basically all the same body.
Exactly.
Most of them were just green uniforms. So, I mean, it's like, and then look where it evolved to, right?
Well,
so
can you take a scroll just up real quick, Rick?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you when to pause, because I got in, so pause right about there. So I got in right around this time, like heavy into like making sure I got everything.
Yep.
And it was when Barbecue came out, which I thought looked really cool. And then you had
your Alley
Spirit. You had Spirit, and then if you scroll down a little bit more, you have Barbecue. Right here.
Outback is right there.
Oh yeah.
Barbecue, Outback, and Spirit. I feel like those three. And even that Storm Shadow, that like grouping in that batch of figures when they started to come out, that was the turning point for them, where they really started to hit full stride on like the design. They giving that modern twist to a classic figure, and they freaking nailed it. And they've done great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Some of my favorite classified figures are right here. Right, I love the Bat. I love Spirit. I love Storm Shadow. Like those
Alley Viper.
Yeah, but just in terms of the ones that I was like, when I saw them, I was like, damn, that's a dope figure. And even considered like, ooh, should I get into this? But I didn't. But then even things like packing in the gator, right? Or the croc.
That crocodile is an amazing figure too.
And then this thing was great because it was kind of a nod to the original.
That was really cool because it was on clearance really quick.
And like you had, it was not just the gator or the croc, right? It was also timber. And so like I guess where I was going with that is like, man, just pause, like wait, they'll get there. And sure, your feedback, I think, informs that. I don't necessarily think some of the intense negativity that was coming out around this time, or shortly before this, necessarily helped that process. Obviously, there's going to be hiccups. Some of that is out of their control.
Yeah, that's beyond them.
Because Hasbro decides we're going to do movies. Although I actually have this figure and actually kind of love her.
The figures themselves weren't bad. The movie was such a disaster, even though it wasn't that much of a disaster. It was a disaster of a Joe movie. Let's put it that way. The movie itself, I enjoyed.
Yeah,
it was a decent Fast and the Furious type style movie, and it was what it was.
Tied into G.I. Joe, a lot of people that are true diehard Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes people did not appreciate the movie, but the figures are decent.
What this gave us too was stuff like this, the HasLabs of the dream gigantic vehicles. I kind of glossed over it with the 84 or the 80s line, but that was the biggest piece, man.
That was what made Joe was the vehicles.
Joe. And so now we're getting that, and I think that's become a part of the sort of like military toy line. It just has become, whether it's accessories,
and like you can
vehicles.
See the evolution, right? They started out with the motorcycles, which is an easy thing to do.
Yep.
Then they went to the pods, and then once they saw how demand the his tank was, and people were really willing to collect that size of a vehicle. Now you have the Vamp, and of course they just announced yesterday officially that the
Stinger,
Cobra Stinger, thank you, Travis, is going to be coming out.
Yep. as
I'm
well
gonna get a
as
stinger. I think I'm gonna get a stinger.
as well as the the missile systems and all the
Yep.
little bits and bobs that you can add to build things out. And of course, they're constantly like testing the market to see what the market will
Oh, the
bear
Cobra
and what
Ferret.
collectors
That's
will
another one
like.
that just came out. Yeah.
And then we go down to here, and it's like, and then they're like, well, we can also get some nostalgia in there. So it's an interesting time. And when I say nostalgia, not only the 80s, but how about, some of this stuff, right? Back to full circle to where we started with some of the like, okay, well, let's do the kind of more true military stuff, but obviously from the 21st century. So I think that stuff is all cool.
Yeah.
That really did lay a foundation. But then we get to today, right? So just I guess when this airs a couple weeks back would have been this live stream where they shared new figures. So it's going strong, and now they're branching off into new territory with the factions. First off, the Storm Shadow. Like, I know a lot of people responded to it negatively, but in these photos, man,
Oh man,
Yeah.
looking good.
I
Yeah,
loved
I like it.
when I loved the Storm Shadow version 2 3 3/4 inch figure when it first came out. I thought that was such a cool figure, and I think this is a great update to it, right? And this is when Storm Shadow becomes a good guy and joins the Joe team. So it's you know,
he's a must get for me at this point. Looking at
oh
that,
yeah, I'm definitely getting
that
him.
is definitely I'm gonna get him for sure.
See how it works, and then you got Alpine and people. Well, why didn't they just mold his goggles on his face and all?
I
of
love
the
that they
stuff?
didn't. I love that they didn't mold it.
So that's like I was telling. We were talking about this yesterday. I was talking about it with Punk, right? And they were talking about how well he doesn't come with a backpack. Now, yes, a mountain climber should definitely have some kind of pack. I agree, but one of the biggest complaints that people are always talking about is, well, you put a backpack on, it plugs into the back, and then there's no straps. So all people would have been doing is complaining about how he didn't have straps to hold his backpack on. So it's like Hasbro can't win on some of those fronts. You know,
Cloth backpack, guys. Cloth backpack. It's got to come.
Right. Yep.
And everybody is an expert. Everybody's a toy maker. Everybody's
Uh-huh.
a designer, and I get it. You know, I have this channel talking about toys, but then we're getting into the factions, right? We're getting into Destro's team of the Iron Grenadiers. I always say Grenadiers again. Thank you for backing me up on that, Ed. But yeah, totally. These like pseudo sci-fi. Mars Industries is developing some wild tech, but also of like, so these guys are wearing like very regal looking uniforms and stuff
the
too.
Swords, the sabers.
That's right, the sabers.
Yep.
And then this is some new territory, right? And a little bit of newness. Take the bats and turn them into grenadiers and throw on some heads for some thing, right? I love in the live stream. They're like, I don't know, maybe it's the person's consciousness is inside this thing and put on a bat or whatever. Like, who cares?
It's cool that they casted that the chest plate out of clear so you can see the stuff underneath like the old one was. That's a cool little nod.
Can you imagine, like, people are like, what is that? That's not real. What is the story? It's like,
I love it.
Can we go back to the intruder caveman guy?
Right, exactly.
Right? When are we gonna get that? That's what I'm waiting for. I need my little. It's gotta be a little smaller. Got some funky articulation.
I'll get with Lenny and see if he can produce that for us in 2028, which will be the 50th anniversary, or 2026, which will be the 50th anniversary for the Intruders line.
Yeah, we need some Intruders.
And then we shouted out some of those photos. Shooting the galaxy. The one that sold me on them. Matthew Cohen, who shoots these photos for the classified line. You were even saying like, you saw the process here. You heard Travis say like, oh man, look at that photo. I'm gonna get it.
Yep.
Yeah, and this, you got to show off what they can do. You got to show off what they look like. You got to show off their features, and go back to the early discussion with G.I. Joe, like those commercials where they showed you the diodes and they showed you the people playing with them, and then the commercials, like that's continuing this tradition.
My biggest thing is I hear so many people be like, oh, Storm Shadow's swords are on the wrong side, or this guy shouldn't be able to do this, and I'm like, G.I. Joe had Dr. Mindbender who took the DNA from Genghis Khan and everything else and created life from it. I mean, come on, guys, you gotta you gotta suspend belief for a little while, because that's what toys are for, right?
Unplug and just dive in deep.
Yeah, exactly.
and take them outside and play with them in the dirt.
Yeah.
I never would have before, but it's my thing now.
Yeah, is that Ed's influence?
Absolutely, it's my co-host.
Yeah, man, this stuff is great. Like, even obviously, this is not necessarily stuff that's been picked up by Hasbro to use in their ads necessarily.
It's
But
pretty
these
cool
are-
that they got him stretching.
Yeah,
I just think
exactly.
that's a great
isn't
capture,
that
right? He's like
rad?
reaching down, doing a stretch so he can, hang on a minute there, bud. Let me stretch before we get into this fight.
Yeah.
Before I jump off this cliff, let me make sure everything's loose.
That's
And
right.
you got this dude jump midair, like, oh man.
And they're
Look at
doing it
that.
smart,
That's
right?
awesome.
Because they're now, Lenny announced yesterday that all the neck pegs are going to be the same, so you can interchange all the necks, right? Moving forward.
Good.
Instead of like how they were doing different ball joints on the tops of each of the necks, which was
Yeah,
a really
they're getting hip
thing.
to the pop and swap
Yep.
and the
And then
customizing.
all the bats now can interchange all of their tools
Parts.
for their arms and their heads. So cool stuff.
Smart. All right.
That guy looks
So-
awesome without his actual helmet on.
I
love
like
that
him.
shot.
He's got an interesting aesthetic of
Yep.
sci-fi mixed with this sort of like European World War One, really, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
regalia and all of that, right? So
Yeah.
G.I. Joe, obviously now it's 2024. Other people are developing lines, some before 2024, that are really based on this foundation that G.I. Joe helped create. And part of it is, yes, there's some military elements for sure, but it's mixed in with other genre. And so I look at this figure, and then we go to our next line, which is pretty newly announced.
Yes.
So this is Fresh Monkey Fiction's full reveal of the Order of the Crimson Moon line, which really is like a subline, I guess, connected to the same world of one of their other lines, right?
Yes.
The monster.
It's Operation Monster Force. It's a subline to it. So the basis of this is the Order of the Crimson Moons is a cult faction in Transylvania in 1974, and they are on the brink of releasing a werewolf army onto the world to take over. And then you have
good.
You have 3 heroes which haven't been revealed yet. Their names have. You have a different monster hunter. His last name's Dalton, I think. And then you have a different guy who's like adventurer guy, right? And then you have the Face, who is just like an assassin type guy that's on the good guys team.
Can I just say respect to Fresh Monkey Fiction, because one, I think they're doing some really cool stuff and pulling from some great traditions as well, IP wise, and we'll get to that in a second. But their use of the art to really like tie it with comic books and cartoons. I love this art. Like
they just announced that they're doing an Eagle Force comic book for their Eagle Force line, and they're going to be doing a comic book. I imagine they'll do one for this, but they definitely announced the Operation Monster Force comic book.
Do either of you know who this artist is? Because it's sick.
Yeah, I don't know who it is, but it's awesome stuff.
Man, I love it. It's like straight up like Howard Chaykin stuff, like from back in the day. It just reminds me of. And great stuff. Introduces the mood, black, red. Here we go. And then here's some of the characters. And this is all 112. Going to be sized up.
He's the leader. And during their uprising, there is a prophecy that gets revealed that someone other than him, that's one of the leaders of the Crimson Moon Order, is going to overthrow him. So then, of course, all the leaders get suspicious of each other, and that's how they start falling apart.
Love it. And so you get the red, the black, but then you've got these logos that are like skull and crossbones and stuff. And so some of this, and here's the werewolf troops, and again, I'm reminded very much of the Iron Grenadier that we were just sort of looking at, right?
Yeah,
it's a lot right in there, man. But what a cool concept, right? Like, and this has been done in movies and like B movies and other stuff. Werewolves and Nazis and whatever, soldiers, whatever.
This guy's not only a zombie werewolf, but he has a zombie alternate head. I mean,
and hands.
And hands.
And comes with his gridiron inspired weapons or designed weapons.
Yes, that's the other thing. So there's a new piece that's sort of developing of these like indie companies sort of collaborating a little bit more, which I think is brilliant. And also this company is also Fresh Monkey's also sort of like working closely with a retailer, right? With Big Bad. I'm not totally sure what the relationship is there, but like we're taking this into 2024 where they're coming up with trying to create new IP that are still like there's some touchstones, things that might feel familiar to some people, some things more directly to existing IP.
Speaking of the Iron Grenadiers, right? I could see this guy like being used as like the guy that overthrows Destro, right? I mean, like, he's got the trench coat for the Iron Grenadiers. He's got the helmeted face like the Iron Grenadiers.
He's my favorite.
Yeah, he's awesome looking.
Look at this Exterminator helmet. You got jet packs.
Oh yeah,
this line is
right
wild.
there. That's my second favorite one. Those are
Wolfsbane.
two must-gets for me.
Yeah.
And then that Robo Sapien helmet.
Yeah. The not Destro looking helmet. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. and even bigger, the Crimson Moon Contagion.
Contagion. Yep.
Contagion. Yeah.
That's the stuff that turns you into a werewolf.
Yep.
I'm assuming it looks. I love how it looks. I can't wait to see that in hand though. Like, does it come apart those 3 levels and go in the suitcase? Like, that's so cool to me.
Well, I bet you the case. I bet you it'll go into the case because it's designed by Gridiron for sure.
Totally.
And all their stuff goes into cases, right?
So cool. Yeah, I didn't really gloss over that, but like G.I. Joe again set up even from the 60s the notion of accessories and coming with all this stuff, and here we are with another toy line that clearly owes some of its, DNA to G.I. Joe in more ways than one.
Yeah.
But they understand what works and what people like. And this is the challenge, right? There are people with their nostalgia bands that are very much tied to that kind of collecting, which is great. The trick is like, well, how do we also sell them on other toys that they might want to collect, right? And so I think Fresh Monkey is definitely onto something, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with Monster Force, but definitely now with this Crimson Moon and some of the other things they've announced. But here's the fun thing, DNA. You kind of mentioned Palatoy in passing.
Yep.
But that G.I. Joe in the 80s, actually even before then, even in the 60s, Hasbro was licensing their toys and their tools out to other companies to make in overseas markets. Palatoy was that in the UK, and they ended up taking the G.I. Joe line in the 80s and repurposing them into their own team, right? Obviously, like a UK line and sold in European markets based on a real American hero probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So they created Action Force, right? This whole other team with its own lore. And what's funny is that one of their enemies was a group that looked very similar to the Order of the Crimson Moon.
Absolutely.
And
Bear and Iron Blood.
Yep. And so what's funny is that the way this was done, and we know it's intentional, that if you look at the swapped heads and the parts, if you took some of these heads like this one and combined them with some other bodies, you can completely recreate some of those old Palatoy Action Force characters, which I think is brilliant.
Great
Absolutely
stuff, man.
Brilliant.
Totally brilliant. And these guys, from the pictures they showed of the scale for the Monster Force figures that they have done, right? Scale perfectly with your classified. So I mean, you could, rebuild a whole classified Palatoy Action Force.
And I learned that all from Professor Axion when we were talking about this. Because I didn't know this. This was taught through my co-host Professor Axion.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, as your brother said, I know my shit.
Yeah, that's what he did say. He did.
Yeah, he absolutely knows his stuff, as we heard earlier, like full on G.I. Joe history to hear, the connections to the Palatoy.
That guy with the long trench coat is just so cool.
This guy?
Yeah. That face sculpt.
There's a little Billy Bob Thornton in that thing.
Yeah. If you look at the guy with the eye patch, he looks just like one of the head sculpts that's coming with the General Brown from Monster Force, but he has the eye patch.
Oh,
so you could totally use him as like a good guy. Just swap his head onto a different, a body. He could be like,
Yeah, I want to see people's Archer customs too.
I imagine some people are going to take him and use him on like they might take him and put him on for what kind of Marvel?
Fury.
Fury. They could use him as Nick
maybe
Fury.
like an older school. Yeah,
put a little white on the sides of his head for sure.
Yep.
The cool
And
thing
just-
also about all the Fresh Monkey Fiction figures is that all the parts are pop and swap with each other. So all the neck posts are the same, all the hands pop in every figure. So there's no worrying about whether this head can be swapped to that body because they made them all standardized.
Okay.
When they get all these lines out and more things in people's hands, it's going to be really.
It's going to blow up once the first Monster Force figures hit and guys start doing reviews of them like Punk and Kato and all those guys. It's going to blow up.
So what's happening with these right now is they're kind of in this pre-order / crowdfunding phase.
Yep.
And I say pre-order is probably the most accurate, where or maybe a conditional pre-order, if you will.
Yeah.
Where if they don't hit their MOQ and get enough orders, they won't make them. But so. The
as
link
far
is
as I
again
know,
in that QR code and the URL
as
at
of
the bottom.
yesterday, they were only like 750 units away from hitting the stretch goal. So they're definitely it'll probably be fun without a problem.
And then we've got let's see, Monster Force, so it is a part of a larger universe, as you pointed out. So again, I think this character could.
As this guy is called, he is the Sleepwalker of the Crimson Moon Division. So I mean, there you go.
So fast forward to, I'm assuming this is modern era now, Monster Force.
I'm guessing that's how it works. Yep.
And so the legacy of the Order of the Crimson Moon continues.
Which makes sense because in the Monster Force lore, there's only one virus left to change a person into a Kilowog werewolf in their universe. And the mad scientist that has that is working on making more of it again. So that makes sense, right? 74, the Crimson Moon thing happens. They're trying to obviously they fall apart at some point in time. It doesn't happen. And now, they figure out another way.
That's so cool
to bring this to fruition.
I know you love lore, man. I know you love
that's
lore.
That's me,
Travis.
man. Like a solid lore. Like, and again, it's only because like the lore pulls me in. But I go in my own world because I'm already picturing, okay, I can use Carrick to work with some of these guys and I can use Destro with these guys. And, I can pull all of the different things together in its own piece. But the lore at its core, I'm going to stumble on words because I'm mixing them all together.
Quit trying to rhyme it. Just say it.
I wasn't. It's completely unintentional. But it all pulls it together for me. And like when he just made those two dots connect, I'm like, oh man, I was not in on Monster Force at all. But now that you've got this backstory from like 74 to the current stuff, I'm like,
isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the uniforms of these guys, right? It still has that Nazi, German, Russian military vibe to it, right?
Eastern Europe or whatever, right?
Hey, let's tie it all together because some of these guys, there's also connections to Eagle Force.
Absolutely.
Because these some of these characters were also released under the Eagle Force brand as sort of an enemy for Eagle Force.
Yes.
So they're building out a real cool little world, man. And here we got
there he is.
Here's the
hero Declan Van Helsing.
Yep.
Who is a descendant of the original Van Helsing monster hunter.
Yep.
And he has to go against everything in his family's DNA to release Dracula from captivity in order to fight the evil pharaoh that's releasing the vampires and werewolves onto the world.
And I'll be honest with you, when I saw Wave 1, I was like, great concept. I wasn't totally sold on these Wave 1 figures because they're, like this is kind of military guy, right? And the other guy was pretty interesting. And then you got into the villains, and they've definitely improved also from the first sort of things that we've seen. But I remember sort of seeing their suits, and I believed at the time this Dracula looked the same as what's the name of the main villain, the Pharaoh, the unnamed or nameless, or
no, he's not the nameless one.
Yeah, I know. That's like,
he is called the Pharaoh whose name shall not be spoken, but I can't remember his actual name.
Okay, well, they had very similar suits, right? Repaints, but like, and they looked a little ill-fitting to me. But they're looking a lot better now. So
yeah, they definitely changed Dracula's suit for sure.
These are again expanding the lore, but you've got like, Secret Service / Men in Black agents who are like actually like black-skinned, yellow-eyed demons. So that stuff is just
tactically they are supposed to be working for the good guys, and then the demon head is for when they get transformed to be working for the bad guys.
Got it. And again, all working with so do we know if actually Gridiron is doing all of their weapons?
They
Yes.
didn't do the earlier ones, right?
From the first release on, they're going to be doing them. So after like Van Helsing, Dracula, and whoever the first couple of
so wave 1 is non-Gridiron.
right. Yeah, wave 1 is non-Gridiron.
One
After that,
wave 1 is
Got it.
yeah, will be Gridiron.
Which is great because you play to your strengths and you're collaborating with other indie toy makers and smaller
Absolutely.
companies. And on that note, you get Kilowog, right?
Yep.
Which was a real attention getting on a lot of people's best of lists action figure by Maestro Union from the Fury Planet line. Vet William, and now they're basically collabing with them to use their tooling and just repurpose that existing figure, add a couple of Gridiron touches here. This cool weapon. The coat I want to say is new as well. So,
I think they did a little bit of sculpt changing, but the body itself is the Fury Planet.
I feel like it's very similar to the sculpt that Adam highly articulated and myself have from the Joy Toy for the wolf that they have there. It's very, very similar to that, but it's definitely scaled up quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I saw that one. The sculpt is a little bit different. If you take a look at the face and stuff, that tends to be a little bit more on the animated style. So you see it in the fur, a lot less detail on it. It's a great sculpt. But yeah, so I love the notion of them sort of like collabing. You can kind of see the logo down here. I think it's really smart, especially when, frankly, you are trying to take a little bit of shine away from Hasbro's G.I. Joe Classified line, both on the hard military end. Well, actually, I wouldn't say hard military, but on that a little bit more military, and especially when it comes to the accessories, right? And then with the sci-fi stuff and the Destro of it all, and the Cobra Commander, Cobra Law, Crystal Ball, Serpentor of it all. So I think it's super smart, and I don't know, it's kind of neat to see these like smaller companies pulling a Voltron. And shout out to Gridiron, because like some of this stuff in here in particular is great, as well as like the cool heads that are involved in this. Good stuff. And then we get, you got your brass, you've got the other folks, but like I love that
people are going to be crazy for this figure, for G.I. Joe and everything, because we don't have enough dressed military generals, right?
So, and they know that,
and this Carl,
so they're like, and so they're like, well, let's give them alternate heads then and necks, right? There's the alternate head and neck. So that they can give you some face sculpts. And if you look at those sculpts, as you pointed out, there's Carl Weathers, there's General Ross ish, right?
Is that
there's a classic G.I. Joe ish,
or is it actually
the hair sculpted?
Okay.
Oh, it's all sculpted. Are you wondering if it's flocked?
Yeah,
mine will be flocked. Mine will be flocked. But
do we know who this was meant to be? It seems
I think that's going to be like the G.I. Joe Adventurer, which was the guy with the flocked hair but no beard. Is what I'm assuming. And
includes portraits of the Sentinels. Do we know what that is in reference to in the line?
No, they haven't anything. They haven't said anything about anybody except for General Brown. The other cool thing is it comes with the General Brown patch that goes on the uniform.
Oh, right.
And then right underneath the other one is a pocket that you can put on there, so you can write in the name or just leave it blank. That goes on that pocket to get away from General Brown.
That's amazing. Love it. So, man, seriously, Fresh Monkey Fiction, you're doing some great stuff. I will be watching from afar and talking about it as much as I can, because
I will be neck deep in
yes, that's right. Ed is absolutely has been covering this in his previous show as well. Just really going deep into the lore. You're the one who really introduced me, because I didn't go and do all the clicks and read all of it, and you and your son kind of broke it down on your old show, and really cool. And then here's this character, Halloween Boy, is also a tie-in from an indie comic, right? Based on the comic book character Halloween Boy by Dave Baker. What a cool, just weird, off-kilter collab. And I can maybe see some people being like, well, how does this fit in or whatever? And if you're doing that, you're doing it wrong. I'm sorry. Like, you're just doing it wrong. Because again, go back to the G.I. Joe. We had all the green suits, and then we had Raptor. and we had Nemesis Enforcer and Dreadnoks, and it's fine. It's all good. And skip the ones you don't like, but how cool is just so fun. So fun. Halloween Boy, Phantom Core. Yeah, I mean, I know we should move, but just amazing stuff. Who is this? This is Phantom Core to this right here, man. I love it. Definitely things we've seen before, whether that was in the Hellboy film, comic, or Acid Rain's character, but it's a brain in a glass jar on a head. Brilliant. And then the last one I wanted to share is because this is based again on the collaboration thing that I love. This is their Sasquatch.
Is that out for pre-order?
Nope. This is the Sasquatch that they showed a while back. If you'll notice, it says fall 2023. But this is Chatsworth, the Sasquatch. That's a work in progress. The body again is a collab with Memory Toys, right? Their bear, which I have two of. I have a brown bear and the war bear and the panda.
I'm going to have two Chatsworth, one to stay a Monster Force and one just to be a Squatch, because he's just a cool character. His actual backstory is pretty cool because he's a Sasquatch that grew up liking 80s television and MTV and video games.
And Harry and the Hendersons?
That's exactly what I was thinking. So it's really Harry.
And it's cool. You saw the Donner Party too. I mean, we could go on and on, but they're doing some good stuff. And I really, really, really can't wait to see how this all plays out, because they're going to hit. I think they're really going to hit with this. And then you see they're even doing little accessories, right? Dr. Caligari's Zeiss Conductor. Cool little accessory, torture accessory thing. All right.
And then something happened at one.
Was that?
I think Ed's losing his network.
But hopefully they'll come back.
Well,
he's back.
Let me just point something out real quick.
Yeah, what's that?
Brick. So as we're doing this live, I'm going through Big Bad and adding everything to my cart.
And you can pre-order. It's Big Bad, so you know how that works.
Well, actually, I don't. I was going to ask Ed if he could explain it to me, because I normally go to Helidope and I pay right away. So I don't know how Big Bad works, to be honest.
We'll handle that offline.
Yeah.
Let's
27 figures. 27 figures.
Let's switch gears real quick.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we are circling back now to Valaverse's Action Force. And I know there's probably some confusion with the name. Could you all help break down the Valaverse Action Force phenomenon, which is technically chronologically in terms of toy history before the stuff that we just saw from Fresh Monkey Fiction, but I feel like going through the Palatoy Action Force and then coming back to this kind of made sense.
Yeah,
what's
absolutely.
up with Action Force?
So I can speak to it from the Valaverse incarnation of Action Force. So it's essentially a sequel, or it's been said to be an extension of the original, and taking it to different with the original characters, with I think only the Steel Brigade being the only carryover from my understanding, but basically is essentially the lores behind it is the divide of fall of the United States 2028, and then there was each
4 more years, guys.
Exactly. Each state kind of having its own run government with its own becoming its own republic, and there was the rise of New Colonia, which are a set of characters. That includes Carrick and Army Colonel Reginald Mathis. Then they have the emergence of Swarm, which is a technically advanced group. So think of it, if you're thinking of Joe's, right, and tie it back, that's their version of Cobra, right? Their bad guy.
This guy right here, Swarm.
That's one of those.
These are the Swarm sort of troops, yeah.
Yep. And it's resistance and conflict, right? There's constantly smaller republics and militia movements formed, alliances to resist the oppression of New Colonia and the Swarm, leading to the conflict going on. There's comic book lore to it, and more importantly, the formation of Action Force. So in response to the oppressive regimes of the New Colonia and the Swarm, a secret alliance of resistance groups and international allies created a top secret strike team called Action Force to battle against their larger oppressors and restore freedom back to the nation. And one of the things is, I think, California is wiped off the map. That's one of the big things from the comic. Like, it just doesn't exist. And Texas is a big stronghold for things. So it's a really cool lore for me. But what you see in the picture here is, one of the
because you hate California, is that right?
No, I don't have a problem with California.
I'm just kidding.
I don't have a problem with anything. Everything works for me. The big thing with this, what you see on the screen here is, and that's the lore, the history, right? So that's the Valaverse direction of Action Force, after obtaining that IP and stuff, right? And, then the idea was a Kickstarter. The first one I didn't know about, but I've heard, the rumblings that it failed, wasn't successful. I don't know how far off it was, but it just wasn't, considering what went on, it wasn't ready to launch.
Let me ask you this then.
Yes,
so
sir.
just in terms of my brain, this is the wave one of those figures. Was that part of that original Kickstarter, or there's like a whole other set of designs and stuff?
I think there was some designs that were different. Some things were tweaked and tailored. This right here is the successful Kickstarter. Release stuff here. So I can't speak heavily on that original Kickstarter because, again, I didn't actually find Action Force myself until G.I. Joe Classified came out. I was having a hard time finding stuff in the stores. They only had so many figures released, and I wanted more. I wanted filler figures, and I came across some YouTubers, and that's how I found the whole toy community beyond wrestling action figures, was diving in through Joe's, which led me to Action Force, and I found it just at the tail end of the Kickstarter, so the successful one. I didn't meet and reach the Kickstarter. It had already funded. There was all the stuff with COVID. Valaverse decided that they were going to supplement some comics during that time to start building that lore and keeping consumers interested and stuff. And then obviously COVID threw distribution off and stuff. So I want to say it was like 2021-ish when I started diving in heavy to the Action Force stuff and Joe's. And I got in right at the end of the year, I think, right when they got all their shipment in for wave one for the Kickstarters. So they fulfilled, I think, all the Kickstarters, and then they had their in-stock sales. I snagged up, every one that I could get. And luckily I got in right at the perfect time, to be able to get them before, you had to wait for re-releases and stuff. So I have all of these figures, and, Condor in the middle, Bone Collector in the back, Carrick here in the front with the, kind of gladiator helmet. Those are some of my favorite ones.
Yeah, man, it's cool. Again, blending the sort of military vibe with the fantasy vibe. Like, I think it's pretty cool looking stuff. It's definitely striking. Cool sci-fi bents to the armor and everything. And who's this guy on the right here?
Is that Roll?
Yeah, that's Roll. That's supposed to be a rollout.
Rollout.
He was supposed to be part of the first wave. He ended up getting held back to the second.
Got it.
And there are some costume changes and stuff, like Condor did not come out in all black like he showed in this picture. And a little bit different head sculpt.
But it's cool, like creating a whole new world using the Action Force name. Was there any, like, because that Action Force lore is pretty big in the UK Action Force lore. And you mentioned briefly that some of that was held over, but really, is it truly its own unique thing, or are they building it all on that old stuff?
No, it's all
unique. It's all the name. The name is the only thing, and the idea of an elite group of military, activists that are taking part to defend freedom and such. It's like
a modern, like a reboot of an old thing, but like really changing it. Like, dare I say, the G.I. Joe movies that we got were really not truly the G.I. Joe, or like you said, the Snake Eyes movie really took all sorts of liberties to bring that story into modern theaters. So in many ways, this is like taking Action Force but creating its own unique story around it.
Exactly.
He has the blessing of the guy that created the Action Force original.
There's been interviews, I believe, where he's claimed that not Bobby, but I believe the other individuals been very supportive of, hey, if somebody was going to take the Action Force name and brand and bring it to another generation with a unique twist, fully supportive of it. And I misspoke when I said previously that I think Steel Brigade is like the only carryover from like the Action Force and Joe branding. There's also Sergeant Slaughter and Desert Rat.
Right.
While Desert Rat is tied to a little different and its own unique kind of throw to an individual person that's out there.
Okay.
Sergeant Slaughter is, from the original, tie-in, and I thought that was really cool because they showed him as an older man, and they treated it as kind of like, hey, my time is done. It's time for others to take my journey forward.
Desert Rat was a character in the original Palatoy Action Force.
Correct. The person that this one's
now they tied
it
it to the person that it's tied to nowadays.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
And so here are wave 2, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so this is where you see Slaughter in there.
And Bobby kind of did the same thing like Hasbro did, right? He's got Slaughter in there, and then the guy in the blue shirt in the
Tim
back
Kennedy.
there, Tim Kennedy.
Yep.
He's an actual real life veteran who's done MMA and big weapons.
Served in the military.
Yeah, I saw his picture in there. Yeah, IG.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Great. And so they're going through creating their own people. Is this a new faction down here, or
that was part of Carrick's group?
Yeah.
I can't remember what the name of it is off the top of my head.
It's a cavalry something.
Yeah, Carrick's Cavalry or whatever it is.
Okay.
But basically, it's his militia, his group enforcers, his bullies, and then you have the additional swarm, character above, using that more hybrid technology.
Man, I could see. I don't know if people have, but I could totally see people using some of this swarm stuff in Marvel Legends for like an AIM offshoot or AIM sort of team.
Yep. Yeah, the Scarabs and the Swarm are kind of a hybrid robotic type thing, whereas the Cavalry guy in the bottom was kind of like the human soldier of the bad guy. So
okay. And then wave 3, I remember these really well, and it was kind of cool. And I love that this has become a thing. You were mentioning how G.I. Joe and Hasbro were really good about like trying to work in women into their line as early as the 60s line, with just to varying degrees of success. And so I love this. The more sort of modern version of this for these indie companies is we got to get the standard buck, which tends to be the dudes. But you can reuse, right? And you can reuse parts, you're tooling, you're sharing parts. And then maybe like by a later wave, you do an entire wave of.
So Todd McFarlane said in an interview at some point in time that he could not sell a whole wave of female figures. And Bobby said, "Hold my beer." And then he released this wave of all female figures.
And that was impressive to me.
But real quick, I've heard people say that, but was this before or after Zezra did it?
I believe it was after, though.
Okay, I was
but
just going to.
I don't think Zezra is known enough to really,
Sure, no, but they full on did it, and those are the most valuable figures currently in the line, and they're dope figures. And I'm not taking that away. I just want to I'm pointing out that it's a thing that's being done for reasons, right? Because again, tooling and all of that, when you're a smaller company, you want to focus on the design of everything and then working on the accessories. AWOC's doing the same thing, right?
I agree with what McFarlane said, right? In his world where he sells to mass retailers, he's not going to sell a full line of female figures. It's just not going to happen.
Well, time out for a second, right? It works the exact same opposite. You're not going to see an entire line of Barbie male figures come out, right?
Right.
It's not marketed to that. So more often than not, you're not going to find success in that. So I get in that major thing here. I think was impressive because to me, it's a financial risk because Bobby, Valaverse specifically is so fresh to then come out and say, we're going to do this and we're going to roll our dice on it and shoot for the sky. And, there had been, some concern with, there was a ton of pros, ton of cons. Let's just say that, right? With the product when the Action Force came out, I heard a lot of things. Wave 1, some issues. Wave 2, they fixed some things. And they continue to go. Wave 2 had some really good, figures. The SDS releases that they came out with, the plastic. Others will tell you was some of the best plastic they felt, I believe. In that form, and to come out all guns blazing with these female wave, and this is coming from a collector that is not. I was a pro wrestling action figure collector prior to 2020. My kids collected some Marvel Legends, but mine was all wrestlers. I only picked up the female figures because the markup on them later. Well, actually, time out. I only picked them up because I tried to get my daughter into them because my boys were into the wrestling, but my daughter wasn't, and I was like, oh, this is going to be my way to pull her in. She didn't care, so I had all these figures, and then I realized, crap, these girl figures, for whatever reason, I have no interest in collecting them because it's just not something that interests me. I didn't play with the girls to have them fight each other when I was, using the wrestlers. I had them, wrestling. So I went to what appealed to me, but I found that these female figures to other people were like major value pieces. So knowing that, seeing him come out and do this, I was like, man, that's a ballsy move back in 2022 when he announced it. And, to come out with it, I have every single one of them. I think the only one that I don't have is I didn't go with a lot of the army builder ones, but I got the core characters. And that's the other thing about the Action Force line, Brick, is that they have a ton of army builder ones that they drop in every wave too. So folks have the ability to, have filler figures, right? Troop builders and stuff, right? So that's a really cool feature. And, he's added some guns into it instead of just sending it out. It's a little bit cheaper and whatnot. But when he came out with this girls pack, I was impressed. And, it's been a huge hit. So
let me say this. No, totally. And I think it's great. And again, the other folks have done it and continue to do it, which is great. But it's funny to go back to our earliest conversation. We started this off with G.I. Joe, which was a intentional attempt to rebrand a doll into a new thing for quote unquote boys play. And obviously times have changed. But the funny thing is, like, we kind of created this mess that McFarlane sort of has keep talking to. Like, we've essentially conditioned young boys to play and to expect to play in a particular way, and their parents to expect that there's a certain way to play, and young quote unquote girls to do the same, and never the twain shall meet or whatever, right? And so now we're here in 2024 and we're seeing the sort of reconciliation and the reckoning a little bit, and it's great. We can get an indie toy line, toy maker like a Valaverse or a Zezre Studios or a Spiro Toys, who is just like, we're doing the whole wave, and it's a way to get those things out there.
Yeah, and you also got the one guys that are doing Red Sonja that did all females, right?
Loose Collector.
Yeah, Loose Collector did the whole female thing.
I'll just say that these figures are definitely really cool. I really like, these are some of them, like the face sculpts, and these are obviously really early prototypes, paint masters that we're looking at in this particular shot. But I've seen the sort of final figures, and I really like the face sculpts, particularly on these two figures.
And so Bobby has a variant of the girl in the red, which is his
sort of bloody, character. Right?
Yep. And then he did Warpath version of
which
her,
is really cool. That was PowerCon, right?
She's got Native American, background. So he did like a Warpath where she's got her face painted and she comes with a tomahawk and all sorts of stuff. And now he's releasing head packs of the different characters also. So
that was either a DOLLS or a PowerCon exclusive, I believe.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it was. Yeah.
Yep. This is cool right here.
Then we get into vehicles again, going back to the roots of G.I. Joe, doing whatever helicopters and all the different vehicles, and then we did Real American Hero, all those. Classified, we know, is starting to branch off into vehicles, and then here's Valaverse doing their vehicle. What's up with this?
So there's actually a story behind this for those that don't follow, Bobby and Valaverse closely. But the story on this is that for a long time on those chats, as people were getting amped up about, Action Force, like, hey, when are you going to give us a vehicle? And, a lot of people, there's no value in 1/12. There's just no money to be made. Well, obviously, fast forward, there's money being made on 1/12 scale vehicles quite a bit.
Well, the problem was everybody was concerned about the size, right? How much shelf space
absolutely.
These 1/12 vehicles take up, which is a lot, right? I mean, they take up a lot of.
Well, the his tank's not here anymore, right? Because it was taken out, and I never took it out of the box, and that's just because it was too big. So the whole idea behind this is kind of like an ongoing gag in the chat. Hey, what's the announcement? Is it a vehicle? And then from my understanding, Bobby, the creator of Valaverse and this Action Force line here, he was watching the Chris Pratt show on Amazon Prime, which is it was the military one where I think it's Chris Pratt, the Terminalist, which is a really good TV show if you're into that stuff. And the series was fun. It's based off a book, but basically in it there was the Rezvani vehicles were being used by some of the military guys, and it looked like something. And I recognized it in the show too. I'm like, that's a cool looking vehicle. It's like a $200,000-$300,000 civilian grade armor proof vehicle, and like some major badass vehicle that's sold out there. And basically he loved it. He reached out to them, worked out a deal, and that's what's got the Rezvani Vanguard essentially, which is their copy of it. And the Rezvani has a ton of other, I don't want to say ton, they have a number of other really cool military style vehicles. So if this is successful, the hope is that you may see some other renditions of Rezvani vehicles too.
And Bobby was smart about it when he first launched it. Before he designed it, he came out with 4 colors, right? He had black, gray, tan, and green. Did a vote on his fan, on his IG and his YouTube, right? So people voted. He was hoping for the tan. That was what he wanted. But the gray one, which is the main one, but he's also releasing them in both colors. So
yeah, and I think I think the reason he was tied so hard to the brown or desert, sorry, is because it's so hot up here in New York. I'm sitting here chewing ice every now and again. He has so many of the figures that he had recently released in this Desert Tan. You had Desert Rat, you had the Desert Condor, you had the Desert Steel Brigade. I think
Desert
some of the
Trooper.
lines, the Desert Trooper, I think some of his more recent releases tied so heavily to this Desert Tan, color that he was, partially pot committed to going that direction. But I think because of the voting, he took that, that there's a lot of folks that don't necessarily want the Desert Storm approach vehicle, and they want to go with more of a suburban military.
People are using the gray one because it's going to be perfect for like a CIA
exactly
type of thing, right? I mean, that's what it's all about.
So you're going to use a bunch of those, what was it?
The black watches. Yeah,
the black watches.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So now we're talking, an indie toy company has thrown their hat in the ring for 112 military style vehicles. Definitely leaning more towards sort of modern warfare, right? Like the stuff of wealthy oligarchs and, and so we bridge the gap with Ramen Toy, another small indie toy company who is taking nods from classic G.I. Joe 80s vehicles, in this case, the Toss and Cross, and creating a system. Love me a good system as a Lego person, a Mythic Legions person, a system for modular vehicle building. So yeah, you've got the Valaverse Vanguard, big car. Now we're skewing more back in the military end of things with this. When first I saw this, I think the first time I actually saw was the Toss and Cross, and I was like, wow, that's an interesting choice of all the vehicles.
I think
shout out Toll Booth. No, it was the first that I saw. I
think the first one he hinted was the Wolverine, and that was just like his early concepts, right? Then he came out with the system afterwards, which is great, right? It's like, what else can I do with this basic tank body, right? And then
absolutely. And so just taking this body, and you can kind of see like the engineering, and this is pretty damn cool. Like
the Bridge Layer was such a cool vehicle back in the day, right? I mean,
it was so weird. I loved it, but it was absolutely
I've seen one of those things in action, dude. They exist for real.
With the Toll Booth. Shout out Toll Booth. So then there's
with the sledgehammer.
Yeah, totally. I always wanted to make the Village People, him and Spirit and Wild Bill, and anyways, and then here it is again, some classic toss and cross action, but it's cool. Like, and again, so like for the folks, if you're seeing this like me, and this is the first one you're seeing, you're like, wait, what? Like, of all the vehicles to make? But again, as Ed said, they're modular, so you can sort of take these things out. There's a system. By the way, I appreciate that he figured out a way to actually detach the bridge. That was my one gripe of the original. But as you pointed out, the Wolverine, Cover Girl's Wolverine, man, I love it. What is he calling it?
I don't know what he's
the Phalanx rocket launcher. Okay. Phalanx, yes. It's cool though, man. Like what a deal. And I am, at first I wasn't sure if he was going to sell this as a sort of kit, but no, he's offering different models for purposes of logistics and fulfillment. That makes sense. People order the one thing and they get the one thing. And if you have multiple, you can do sort of an inner switch. I've seen some people say, hey man, I better get the chance to get the 3-in-1 or whatever. And whatever, that's a marketing thing. That's a logistics thing. It's easier said than done. And there's always a question of, will people actually want that? But look at this, man, the blast effects.
And just to be clear, that image right there is no post editing. That is just a photo. He made sure to call that out. There's no work being done there. That is truly the toy that you'd be playing with.
Yeah.
Very cool thing, right? So you literally transform from the one piece using different parts. And he recently did a live stream that I was able to check out, and just, man, it was so cool to see how this thing kind of comes apart, all like magnet based, kind of like his Ramen Racer. Just doing some really cool, clever, unique engineering, I think. And so this is their sort of sci-fi take, an all black one for your maybe Order of the Crimson Moon.
Cobra.
Maybe if you want to do a Cobra thing. Yeah. If you want to do the Grenadiers. Yep. If you want to do maybe Tron.
Yeah. And this is such a nod back to the G.I. Joe too, because all the stuff shot blue and red lasers, right?
Yep.
So I mean,
that's right. But like, what a cool effect too, with the electric kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that mixes right with the his tank, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. His tank colors.
You have two of those driving up next to him.
Yeah. The design sensibility to me is definitely a little unique, though. It feels like the design language of these things. But I don't know. I could easily see it as like again, I keep thinking, man, this is perfect for that Crimson Moon.
Yeah, but if you imagine having this right with your his tank, and this is like cruising alongside of it with a Stinger pulling the HMS. I mean, you got a whole
have two of these, right? Two of these on each side of the his tank, and then you got a couple of Stingers going, pulling stuff. You got a whole you're ready to go to war again. When you go 1/12, you don't army build, you don't world build in your house. You take that crap outside and world build.
That's right.
Yeah, and if you it's funny because so you see sort of like this whole turret comes off, and you can kind of see there's space on the bottom, the body for the characters, and once you take this turret off, you'll still see that sort of space there, and that's where this comes in. It's a different lid with this, and you can take it's a really brilliant system. You can
into this. It's
you can even re-engineer the seating to kind of shift them around to fit. Like that's some great stuff. And of course, there's going to be an exclusive colorway. Going back to the G.I. Joe, what was the name of this tank? This
is based off the M1 Abrams is what it's based off of.
Yeah, based on the real world tank. But in Joe's, they had the green Mobat, and then they had they had the one later. Which, again, just your nods.
It's probably the Mobat because he's calling it the MBT, which would make sense.
No, the green one was the Mobat.
Was it?
Hunter? And so the Hunter one, there was a newer one down the road. This was already, I want to say, like, yes,
that's the one.
So the Hunter MBT is the exclusive in this desert colorway. At Joe Fest, where you'll be when this is airing. So cool stuff.
It's not that you're not picking this up. You're just getting the access.
None of this
pre-ordering stuff, right?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I know we're running a little long. Are you guys still good?
I'm good.
You good, Travis?
Yeah, man. I'm rocking and rolling, brother.
Okay.
Travis is learning and spitting knowledge. He's doing it all.
Unfortunately, he's also ordering at the same time. So be careful because we're about to head into more ramen. I just want to throw this out there. Ramen is also doing figs too, right? Like they're playing off the classified stuff. Some people were not happy with the head that they got for their Falcon. So this was designed as a replacement head. Right. I think what is he calling it? The wolf pack. I don't know. So it's color matched for that. If you really wanted to sort of replace it, I don't know. It's kind of cool because he's also, in addition doing like random head sculpts that you can replace on a classified figure, he's doing his own figure, and that's the Aces of Aviation, right? And so these are just some of the prototypes, but I'm excited to see Ramen actually kind of move into their own creations and their own IP to really get that Fresh Monkey Fiction vibe, even though Fresh Monkey is kind of flirting with some old existing IP too.
And I mean, this is flirting with it too, right? Like this is flirting with Maverick and stuff.
Top Gun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Top Gun, yeah.
Fair enough. You're right. I do want to see them move towards something of their own, because clearly they can make some good stuff. And I think
look at that black tank, right? I mean, that's like something that's the tank body is based on a tank, right? But the top part is all original. He could easily create a sci-fi, space army type line, right, with figures and stuff, and have his own little thing, have his own little world.
He's doing a great job showing everybody what he's able to do, which I think will be really cool, because, and this goes to the independent toy creator, right? He's using this opportunity to put himself out there. People are seeing him. He's obviously received a couple C&Ds, who hasn't at this point, right? I mean, I had one and I'm nobody, right? So, you'll have a situation where he gets some product out in front of us. He shows everybody what he's able to produce and put together. All he needs is a good creative director. If he's not one of himself, or he doesn't have someone already, he gets a creative director, starts bouncing around his own unique IP, and you've got Ace and Ramen's own piece there, and we will see what we can get from him in other stuff. So it allows him to parlay that bridge, right? Like kind of cross that bridge, draw you in with some stuff that you might otherwise not have considered if it was his own independent stuff, because you have no interest in it, but because he's touching on something that you're interested in, pulls you in. And then and I don't know what his plan is, right? I'm just saying, maybe that's where it goes, is hey, tease you and show you what I can do with someone else's stuff or similar like other people's stuff, and then hey, by the way, now you know what you get when you get Ramen stuff. Here's what we want to do on our own. And hopefully that's where he goes. That's right. Like you said, I want to see him do his own stuff.
And you could still do just like Fresh Monkey Fiction is, right? Do nods to, I mean, like
Four Horsemen
and Fresh Monkey Fiction's Ego Force. They have characters that are designed after Charlie Brown. They have Mario and Luigi based characters, right? And they're just homages, right, to those classic, properties.
Yep. All right. Well, that's Ramen Toy. As we sort of oh wait, actually, one more.
Fist, yes.
New kid on the block. We've got Fist, right? FIST. I'm forgetting what the acronym is, but since we were on the vehicles with the tank and the Vanguard, and of course with Classified, they've done the his tank, and they've got the the Dragonfly.
Yes,
that sounded really weird to my head, but yeah, the Dragonfly on its way, as well as they've done the Vamp. Here comes Fist, a brand new toy line coming out of Colombia, and that's part of this story, which is pretty awesome, actually. They're doing a military line that is in the vein of a Monster Force, mixing in the military thing with some fantasy elements, but instead of the horror and Universal monsters, we're looking at the classic orcs and humans struggle, right? But before we get to the figures, this vehicle, when it popped up, I featured it on the news before, but like, what a cool, mean looking design. Like,
I would love to have this vehicle, man. It is so cool.
This is one that I think, this, in my opinion, obviously we're only seeing this prototype piece.
Yeah.
And again, a couple things, right? Fist is a great, the creator of Fist. I'm not sure if folks follow this, but it's Don Man Art. That's the name I know him by. He has a Patreon, does a lot of molding and design work. That's where I found about him a couple years ago. Then obviously he had a Kickstarter that he attempted to launch. Unfortunately, he wasn't successful with that Kickstarter. He was also at that time releasing on his Patreon fully 3D printed action figures. He still has some of his own that are fully 3D printed. So you can, make your fully articulated, 1/12 scale action figures with a printer at home if you wanted to. Really cool guy, really talented individual. But he's out of the Columbia area. And one of the things he's doing is, and I respect the heck out of this, right? Because as somebody in the US that's trying to produce something, I wanted to produce something. Unfortunately, it's very difficult in the US to make things out of plastic here on the US soil. So as he's trying to grow the business in Colombia, he's getting this produced right there, and that's kind of new, right? Like, now nobody else is doing that.
Fantastic.
So that's
setting up a factory to be able to produce this stuff, and they're creating,
and along with the Fist vehicles and action figures, he's got the 12 or the 1/12 scale, and he's also done some 1/18 scale Fist figures,
and he's got a comic.
He's got a comic book coming out.
I've got some stuff for both of those things, but I just really quickly want to to take a little closer look at these things. Like the doors are like such a
it's
really
awesome.
fun design, and it's
called the
this is
Wolverine
my
or something,
favorite.
right?
My favorite 1/12 vehicle.
Is it the
right here.
Wolverine? Is that what we're calling it?
It's something. Yeah, it's called the Wolverine or something.
Yeah,
like
I think that's what it's called.
But it's got totally can slot in again with all the things we've already talked about. All
Nightwolf.
Nightwolf. Yeah, yep, that's
Nightwolf.
Yeah,
Nightwolf.
the Action Force, the monster.
This would be perfect for Monster
Force.
Force, right?
Yeah.
Totally post-apocalyptic, Mad Max.
This to me,
did you say Nightwolf?
Yeah, Nightwolf.
It's the Nightwolf.
Yep.
Yeah, to me, this is by far, in my opinion, what the look it fits in my mind of what I would want my Joes and my Cobras and my Swarm and my everything.
And your Dreadnoks, dude. This is the Dreadnoks.
This would work for everything for me.
Give me a Mad Max line. We've got it going on.
Yep.
But to your point earlier, Travis. Actually, before that, let's take a look at the figures. These are the orcs who have they established who the quote unquote good guys and bad guys are? Or are they just sort of establishing factions without assigning?
So they
intent?
have this guy is the leader of the orcs, and then there's the orc trooper that's behind him.
But are they meant to be the bad guys, or is it like an ambiguous thing?
I think I'm not sure if he said they were bad guys. It's mostly just humans against orcs, and of course the orcs are just assumed to be the evil monsters, right?
Right.
And then he's got
he's
got the dude with the red mohawk. So
yeah, that's right. And so these are the orcs, and then these are this should be this isn't him, but that's okay. I think this is it. This is the so this is the announcement of the figures who are in the United States are going to be carried via Invincible Toys. So that's that.
Just as a shout out, Hella Dope is looking into carrying the fist figures.
Great, and so they can also be through Hella Dope. But I want to get to what you're saying. So Travis, you mentioned the comic book. So here they are, and I know you're a big lore guy. They are going to have a story, right?
Yeah, he's done a good job on his social media presence for a long time with this,
100%.
promoting the lore in general, and kind of like this gimmicky video, which I thought was so like
this is
cheesy but
video.
cool. Like it's he's one of us, right? He's a community member, right? He's into toys and stuff, so it's so cool. And when I saw that, and I don't know much about the lore, I don't know the comic but I know he's done a great job promoting it. So as soon as I get my hands on that, I absolutely will, because I'll add it to the stack of stuff behind me on that stand over there of all of the comics and whatnot that I have related to the toys.
Did you clock the tattoo of his character on the back of his neck?
No, I didn't catch it. Is it there?
I mean, I'm assuming it looks like a skull with the same orange.
Oh yeah. That I wonder if that can't be real. He didn't pull a Cody Rhodes, did he?
Oh, it looks real.
Okay.
I mean, it's
tattoo right there.
It's got the fade. Yeah. I mean,
awesome.
Anyway, so there's comic, and then as you said, it is actually
interesting
a really
though. In that commercial, he said the comic book tells you the bad guys are, and it's not obvious. So going back to your question, Brick, it might not be obvious that the orcs are the bad guys.
Yeah, and that's to me always beautiful.
Us humans might be invading their planet.
It's like Warcraft, right? Like I think Warcraft did a great job of making you rethink, like, oh, good guy, bad guy, but enemy mind for us old people. But exactly. I love this video where he totally goes into what you're talking about, Travis. They're making figures in Colombia, and they've set up a way to do production there, which is awesome, which is only going to give people a different option rather than going overseas to Asia. Right.
The thing is that even South America has a huge toy presence that we probably don't know enough about. Right. Mm-hmm. To this day, Classic Host Falcon is making 12-inch G.I. Joe Adventure Team figures to this day, South America.
Yeah. And, yes, huge toy manufacturing and tradition of making toys in Central America and South America for sure. And what I love about this video is he also highlights, like, we're doing a couple of innovations in addition to the production in Colombia, and I totally appreciate this whole video. But he talks about that every figure is going to come with a 3D file of the heads and custom heads, or like sort of alternate heads, so that people can print things if they have that capability, and really almost encouraging the customizing and stuff. So I'm like, okay, that's smart. Like really,
Well, you think about it, right? You buy a character, right? Like the orc type of body, right? You buy the army builder body. Why not send a thing so you can print your own head and make your own, make your own character with it, right? That's what everybody's doing nowadays. So you might as well give it to the fans because that's what everybody does.
Right. Yep. And then we got, on that note, this video, and it started from right in the middle, but beautiful, this really cute video of this kid getting his set of figures and just being stoked that his dad gifted him these toys. And again, I'm just thinking about the kids in Colombia who, like, there's this big sense of pride that, like, hey, we're creating a homegrown company, and we're making these figures here, and it's our own unique brand, and it's getting some international attention, which is kind of cool. So I'm intrigued to see where these go.
It kind of makes me think of that commercial you showed in the first portion of the show, where the dad and the son were looking at that book, and we're fast forwarding 60 years or whatever, right? And you got this, dad and son playing with the toys or sharing the moment in toys. And that's a moment that dad's going to remember, and that kid's going to remember.
And that dad's probably a huge, action figure fan. From maybe he's not a collector, but maybe, back in the day, he was probably a huge action figure fan, right?
Yep. Trying to give his kid that same experience, right?
Yep. And like you said, something homegrown.
We're familiar with that. And then here is this is what I was trying to show. This is so they got the orcs, and then you've got Mad Dog, presumably the protagonist or leader of the human faction.
Yep.
And he's sort of unboxing that. So
I saw him at PowerCon. Such a cool looking figure.
Yeah, these were cool looking.
And they had the 6-inch version, the one
they have 1/12 and 1/18 scale, but at PowerCon they had both.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Yeah, cool stuff.
Nice thing is it's a new line and it's small, right? There's technically only 3 figures right now.
Yep. All right. So speaking of small, let's go back. So we talked about 12-inch shrinking down to 3.75 because of oil and all those things that we got stuck in there for a while. Then we started jumping around scales. Pretty much we've been in this 1/12 phase here in the States, and the broader international collector market's kind of there too, with their own different variations. But then there are folks who are the holdouts who are like, no, man, 3.75. There's some good stuff happening there. And our friends, right, Ken from Toy Connections and Steve are doing D17. I always forget the name of the company, but Delta 17 is the toy line. Do you guys happen to know the name of the company? I can't remember what
they actually call their company.
I forget, because it's even under Delta 17. But they're doing toys, man, and they're doing their 3.75. This is the line, the logo for the line, Delta 17. And these are the figures. They're really trying to push the smaller format and really do some O-ring, give O-ring some love on that Canadian branded G.I. Joe vehicle there.
And one of the cool things about Delta 17 is they are a 3.75 based figure line, but they have a couple of their figures that are actually closer to 4-inch, still in an O-ring size, O-ring.
Yes, that's right.
Design, right? So they're
based on scale because they're bigger dudes.
They're bigger dudes. So they're, like all of our Joes in 3.75 were 3.75. When they're 4-inch, they're all 4-inch. These guys are like, no, let's make a couple of them bigger guys and go with it.
And they can totally work with your legacy vehicles. It's just we're living in some wild times, and the details on them. I have a couple. They're not in reach, but the detail on these compared to what I grew up with is just on the next level. And also, in fairness, Hasbro's also kind of pushed the G.I. Joe line over the years to this more sort of detailed format. But they've got some really cool things going on with articulation, the wrists, and really just trying to bring some love back to the 3.75 O-ring, but also innovate as well.
And I think the company's name is 5x5 Toys. Is that right?
Yep.
Yes.
5x5. Yep.
Thank you. And so these are one of their factions. Do you does anybody know the name?
I do. Give me 1 second. That's the, is that the Dark Shadow?
Or yes, the Dark Shadows. And it's Dark Shadows. I totally could have just read. But yeah, and the lore is really cool too. There's a sort of the Dark Shadows with their tech kind of thing going on and their vision of what they want to see happen in the world. And then and then here's a character from the retrograd, but also just, photography is really cool. And I think they definitely have hit on something with these characters in particular, because, like they're the folks who are just like, again, it's military, but they want to mix in that sci-fi and have a little bit of that, like, ninja.
It's a cool little nod
thing.
to the original G.I. Joe, 3 3/4 inch line too, because you have like the tech guys that are kind of like Destro's Mars, right? Then you have these guys that are kind of like just the Cobra themselves, and then you have this G.I. Joe team that is, all sorts of characters from all across the world that are just fighting together to, keep peace.
Well, I think this could be its own show in itself if we talked about it.
Sure.
But you guys hinted to it right earlier on when Joe had kind of had like a bad guy, but they didn't name exactly what it was, but it was very clear in who they were suggesting the bad guy is. When you have these action figures, you have to have a bad guy. And unfortunately, if you do anything that resembles something that could be considered targeting a certain group of people, it's inappropriate in today's recognition of, how you would do that. It's gonna, one, it limits who's gonna buy your toys probably, and two, it's an unfair thing to do to the children and the youth, and try to press on some negative influence to them about some group of people. So by moving away from that and making, how do you do that? You have to find an abstract enemy, and unless it's earth, wind, water, like the Action Man, you need to focus on,
or the intruders, which are the
don't get me started on intruders. That is they targeted people. The Neanderthals.
They were uproaring after that. Yep, they were uproaring.
yes. Bodies were coming out of the caves on that one. But like you have to have an abstract enemy, and how do you do that? You come up with something that's removed from the current time, force it into the future. It's aliens, robots, science. It's got to have it. It's the only way to do it. It's why you see it across every one of these military lines.
Yep. And they're also looking at vehicles, and this is something that totally randomly, I had the Delta 17 guys, Ken and Steve, on the Brick Something News one day, and at the end Steve just wanted to let the world know, we're making a
Steve could not hold this secret in. He was just like, I'm designing this helicopter and I gotta let everybody know.
They are working on a 1/18th scale version of the Hind, and which would totally work with your old Joes and any other O-rings you might have. It says here, we're thinking the initial length, the Hind should be about 3 feet long. For reference,
the other
old G.I. Joe Tomahawk is 32.
I believe Steve mentioned that on the Saturday Night Clubhouse when him and Ken were on once, that the Joe parts can go, or the Delta 17 parts can be put together with the old original 3 3/4 inch G.I. Joe line. So like if you take one of the heads out, you can pop it onto one of the G.I. Joe bodies, or vice versa, right?
Nice.
A whole bunch of characters.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, we're kind of coming full circle a little bit. It's funny, they're going back to the scale, and it's cool. Like the world is there, and they're not the only 3 3/4 inch O-ring line that's sort of being launched right now by an indie company.
Yeah,
$25 per figure. These are the exclusive to Joe Fest, again, that is happening in the weekend that this video is airing. So I'm sure people got their hands on these at the convention, because I think by the time this thing airs at 3:45 p.m. Pacific, that con
starting to wind down,
wrapping up. Yep.
Is that a 3-pack for those for $25, or is it just the one guy in the center?
I think it's the single figure, and so there's 2 different figures, I believe. It's this guy and the troop builder.
Okay.
Unless, is this actually the standard figure?
That's the standard figure. It's just the red guy in the back, which is also another nod, because those droid attachments will work with your 3 3/4 inch bat from G.I. Joe.
And these guys could very well be inspired by an old order from the 1970s called the Crimson Moon.
I
Cool
thought you were going to
stuff.
go with the Nathaniel, the invaders.
The intruders, yeah.
No, not the intruders.
These are the
But,
guys that sent the intruders to Earth to fight GI Joe.
And then just to close out, like, because we know military, there's a bunch of other lines, and we're not trying to ignore anyone intentionally. But since we're in the smaller scale, let's take a look at this, man.
Whew.
Joy Toy taking this tinier scale to a whole other level with detail, frankly, that a lot of 112 lines don't have, both in terms of sculpt and paint, and in some cases, articulation as well. It's wild what they can kind of get into these. So this is Joy Toys military wave. This is more of a modern military that we're seeing here. Really great looking figures.
I bought one Joy Toy 3 3/4 inch figure after Travis kind of turned me on to it. And we were both gawking over the detail, right? And I was blown away by the articulation that they put into a 3 3/4 inch figure. Just mind blowing.
It's impressive what they've done, and I actually have a whole stash of this crap now, because I wanted to start getting into the world building,
that.
but then Savage Crucible landed, and I'm really heavy into the fantasy stuff, so I'm like, but the articulation, the detail, like you said, Rick, on this Joy Toy stuff, even beyond just the standard military, they have fantasy stuff, Warhammer, they have their own kind of unique IPs, I think, and they have other IPs
are what
that
caught me, man.
That's what I got into.
Yeah, their mechs are wild.
They're really cool stuff, man. And the detail is just so good. I will say, and I do want to, I know you got a lot of viewers that collect different things. If you are looking into the Joy Toy stuff, just be clear. They have some really cool mechs, but some of it is 1/18th, but then there's some that's like 1/24th and 1/36. So like, just be careful.
The description.
Don't want to, get something that you think is going to scale with your 1/18 and find out it's a fraction of the size, because it definitely has varying scales.
So these are just the truths within this thing. I saw this on Kato and Inutabi's ITS. And he had it in hand. He's about to review it. Who knows? By the time this thing drops, he might even have it up already. But this thing is absolutely gorgeous. It's $100. As were those figure sets that I was just showing on the screen. But dang, look at just the sculpt. The design of this thing is really cool.
This has some modularity to it as well, because the back you can interchange to be different types of backs of this truck.
Yep.
Okay.
It's not tied to just being that seated thing. You can remove things and adjust it. I don't remember all the details on it, but I do remember. And the price point on it, I was really impressed with, because I expected, because Joy Toy falls in line with another line called Acid Rain, which has that fantasy sci-fi steampunk type look to it. And their vehicles are vastly more expensive than this. So I was really shocked when I saw the price on this one, like impressed with it at that point.
What do you think is the deal with the price difference? Is it like you think they just are actually intentionally trying to change construction to be able to lower price? Like, is it?
I think
one Toy is out in the market farther. Sorry, Travis.
Yeah.
One more time?
No. That's definitely part of it. Is they're out in the market farther, and I think it's because that you notice this vehicle is not associated with a specific IP. I don't believe that they're paying the IP prices to get access to any of that stuff, so they're able to keep the price point a little bit lower on this than some of their other Warhammer stuff that they have, which is fairly pricey. But compared to Acid Rain has a bunch of other tier lines within themselves, and they have associated other IPs. But Acid Rain, just even the secondary market is fairly high. I picked up some stuff from our buddy Eddie over at Spiro, and that stuff, when I started diving into the 1/18th, is not cheap, right? Like the 1/18th, even Acid Rain is pretty.
Their
pricey,
vehicles are what, 165 or something like that.
Yeah. I was expecting that vehicle to be closer to 200 when Ed and I first started talking about it. So when I saw it at half the price I anticipated, I was like, I'm good. That I held off though, so it's I definitely want it, but I didn't get it.
Well, hey, there's a discount. If you order $200 or more, you get $10 off.
So just buy 3 of them.
Yeah.
Man, that vehicle is amazing. Here's a couple of more of the characters. These are the mercenaries, the Kina mercenaries. Didn't you say you had some of these?
Yeah. I have a bunch of these They do army builder packs too that are more generic, where it's like they have like waves, like yearly waves, where it's like 8 figures, and they bundle them all together in one box where you get like the whole order for like a discounted price. But they're the lower cost price point on them. So just be aware when you my experience, and I think even Punk saw this too on some of his, is that these lower price point Joy Toys. And what I mean by that is there's really 2 kind of breeds of the price. You have like $20 ones, which are kind of these army builder ones. And then you have the $34 plus ones, which are more individual character type figures. There seems to be a difference in the quality of product from that $20 figure to the $35 figure, or the $35 plus figures. And what I mean by that is some of the hip joints on these cheaper ones, they don't sit right. It seems like just a failed mold on some of them. If you move the leg, it doesn't sit properly and stuff. But otherwise, like, they're really cool. And it's not on all of them. Of the 8 that I got out of that pack, it was 1 figure. And I had another figure that I could tell used the exact same mold, but because the way the hip sat on it, it wasn't an issue. So but Punk saw the same issue with the exact same figure that I had.
And anybody that's a fan of Joy Toy, if you subscribe to their email, they're constantly having sales from their site where you can get 15-20% off figures in some of their motorcycles and smaller vehicles and stuff. So
correct.
Yeah, this stuff I just have to enjoy from afar. Like, actually most of the military stuff we've covered today, but like, it really is amazing to me, and kind of, I think it also just continues to ratchet up the the competitions there, and not just the competition in terms of like, oh, can you do this? Can we do this? Yeah, raising the bar, but also like customer expectation, right? Because if people start to see like, well, there's this stuff and it looks way cooler than these, and it becomes a something that they don't have a choice. They have to respond to at a certain point, right?
Yep.
So kind of fascinating. Again, man, what a wild time. And you've got even these cannons.
That's the Warhammer stuff right there that I was talking about. So that's Warhammer 40K specific.
Got
but
it.
Like, the only reason I know that is because the bodies are a little bulkier, and you have the insignias from the Warhammer stuff on there. But you could use those with those other figures, and they would work very well.
Amazing. And then they're doing the historical real world military. So back to, Hasbro doing the realistic US military in the 60s. Here you've got, they've got World War II Nazis, soldiers. You've got Soviet infantry. Amazing. And G.I. Joe, kind of. So, which pretty much takes us full circle, guys. Thank you, man. This has been an epic episode for sure. Thank you for, hanging in there. And like, man, we went through some military and military adjacent stuff by way of some horror and Neanderthals and everywhere.
Neanderthals are coming.
Yeah, man, but I really appreciate it, especially because right now I'm on the other side of the planet and doing my thing, and Ed is looking at Joe's, right? So it's hilarious to think that all kind of worked out, because it's true. Now there's an entire show called Joe Fest where a lot of the lines are likely to be. Do you know who of the folks that we talked about today might be there?
I'm guessing Invincible Toys will be there for sure. Fresh Monkey Fiction supposed to have some representation there. Delta 17 will be there. Some of the other ones that we didn't mention, like Call Sign Longbow, and
right.
The other one are probably going to be there because they've been at the last few. And then, of course, we got all the fantasy
Skeletron.
The Skeletron will be there. Yep.
Right.
Four Horsemen.
Which is Action Force, Palatoy, Legacy. Yep. Okay.
Yep. Savage Crucible.
Yep.
Four Horsemen. Marauder. Sorry, had to think about it for a second. Marauder's going to be there.
Marauders. Yep.
Chicken Fried Toys will be there. Delta 17.
Oh yeah, Chicken Fried Toys. Yep, that's a cool
Amazing.
Western 3.25 line. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So like the action collecting, the action figure collecting world is in full swing, and it's funny. It goes back to that weird little history moment we had earlier in the show. I know it's gone long, but hey, it's a mega sized edition. It complete with kung fu grip and swivel arm battle grip.
fair.
Eagle Eye. And but before we go, let's go ahead and also let folks know like where they can find you. So over on IG, we've got Ed, and Ed, in addition to doing all his cool YouTube stuff, obviously a wealth of knowledge when it comes to action figures. He's doing his own toy photography as well, taking his figures out, playing with them, taking photos, and taking them outside. You want to tell us a little bit more about the kinds of stuff you tend to post and like how often you post and
I
stuff?
do a lot of everything. So I have no line of figures that I collect. I collect bits and pieces of everything. I look at a figure and go, that's cool, I'm going to own it. And that's what I do. And then I put them all together outside by a creek in the mud, in the dirt, and, just have fun with it.
Like,
And,
no joke, you actually
yeah.
do.
Yeah,
Right by your house.
There's King Kong from NECA along with the Eagle Force from Fresh Monkey Fiction. So, I mean, you mix them all together, right? Whatever works, works. And there's a Fisher Price Adventure People figure from 1970s, the first one I ever owned.
Going on some real adventures, man.
Yep.
I love these backpacks. Yeah, I remember these. So cool. And how often do you post? Is there a schedule? Not really.
No, I usually post. I try to post at least 4 or 5 times a week,
Okay.
But now that I'm posting also for Hella Dope Toys, because I'm doing a lot of stuff for them now. So I'm kind of posting on their site with their product that they're trying to promote along with my stuff. So, yeah,
very cool.
That was a cool place to photograph right there with that waterfall. It was like, I'll tell you a little quick story behind that photo right there. Right. So the Teflon 3, who will be joining me at, Joe Fest, and him and I do a lot of collaborations. He sent me some of the old Toy Biz Lord of the Rings figures, right? Because he knows me and Luke, my son, are big fans. So the one day I was just getting ready to go out for a hike. I'm like, I'm going to take some of those Lord of the Rings figures because I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. And I'm like, I got to find some place that kind of looks like Middle Earth. And I just walk in, I looked across the creek, and I was like, damn, that's perfect right there.
There's Rivendell.
Yeah, walking down a different path, and there you go. You find different things, man. So I tell people all the time, just go out in your backyard.
Go outside.
Yep.
Well, your backyard might be a little bit different from mine, but Travis, you've got over on IG, you've got stuff going on too. You mentioned Hexastacks. We what's going on both with the IG and the world domination of stands? What's going on?
Yes. So the Instagram, I post whatever on there, right? It's, I advertise the show for Toyleet that Ed and I work on. I also have recently started to get into some figure photography stuff because I enjoy it. But I also, post some pictures of me and my Son of Wonder doing some stuff, checking out the Museum of Play and stuff. But it's just kind of like it's my personal space, right? But I advertise what I do for fun and my passions and stuff: family, plastic, football, wrestling. It's kind of all my stuff, That's the Museum of Play out there.
Yeah,
awesome. You may or may not know this, Brick, but it is it's actually basically like the halfway point from where Ed and I both are located.
Okay.
And it's a central place up in New York. And it's the Museum of Play. It has the history and the Hall of Fame of toys. So like there's some really cool stuff out there. I went out there last year to kind of decompress when some stuff wasn't going quite well, and some inspiration and stuff, and had a blast going to it. It's the second time I've been there. I think I'm gonna make a third trip this year. So, but that's what this is. And then Hexastack, right? Is it's my mastermind idea, right? It's the beginning of what is gonna be a massive takeover of the world of collecting stands, right? And basically,
a wonderful way to display.
Exactly. Little play on my name, right? And whatnot. But the goal here is to provide everyone a consistent modular system that has innovative storage and innovative swappable modular buildable pieces to stack and interlock your stands, to let your figures breathe and also do it in a way that's clean and presents a solid product. That's actually an outdated. Those are both outdated models. The newest model is slightly different. But
and these are stuff that you've been showing like people the production, so it's also a great way to kind of just sort of see what the progress is from.
And right now I'm just dealing with some stuff with Shopify and tying in some DNS stuff that I'm trying to tie in with my web address and stuff. But yeah, we're ready to go. Production's fine. I worked out all the kinks and stuff, so it is coming very soon. I know I've been saying that for quite a while, but it is coming. So keep in tune. I will announce it on one of the upcoming Toyleet episodes, and I will be working with folks to do that. They're all 3D printed, but the goal here is to get injection molding. As I've talked to others, I could invest. I've had investors offer to invest to bring it to market through injection molding now, but I want to make sure, we had the Kickstarter. It didn't succeed, which I'm happy for, because there was a lot of growth and a lot of learning I've done over the last 10 months or so since that failed. And unfortunately, nobody's waiting on me financially to deliver on a product with the hiccups that we ran into. So for me, it's a blessing that I don't have that stress, and I've been able to drive the product to where I want it to be before I bring it to market. But rather than go to injection molding, I want to make sure that there's enough consumers out there to justify that investment. And what I'm going to do is take all of the funds that I do generate from the sales of those and roll that into the injection molding, assuming that it is prosperous enough to continue to invest in, which I do believe it is. I've gotten a lot of support and do believe we can get there. And I've already committed to a business partner in, China. For those that don't know, I'm going to work with Ace from Ramen Toys to injection mold those. So that is all coming. It's not if, it's when, and when is sooner than later.
Okay, right on. And then Ed, I know you actually do work with Hella Dope, not as well as helping basically run the Hella Dope show and behind the scenes. So, just tell folks a little bit about that. And what that is.
So Hella Dope Toys, they are your go-to spot for your action figures. They are they have everything from Joy Toy to Marvel Legends, G.I. Joe, Valaverse that we talked about today, Mythic Legions, Cosmic Legions, Animal Warriors of the Kingdom, some Jada toys, of course, and Masters of the Universe. All the toy lines that you expect them to see. They're out in the community. The guys are really cool. They have their show on Sunday nights at 9:00 Eastern time. They ship everything within one business day of order. So if you order it on a Sunday night, it goes out Monday. And living in New York, I get mine 2 days after they ship it every time. And
that's wild, man.
They ship fast, and they ship, everything's packed beautifully, they got a lot of stuff, and they're trying to expand, so if you have something that you're looking for that they don't carry, don't hesitate to shoot them a chat or a message and just say, hey, what about carrying this? And if it's something they think is cool, they are now expanding into the anime stuff. As you've seen, Ted got a couple of anime figures, and he's looking for more to carry.
Nice.
Part of that came from PowerCon, because during PowerCon they had the anime con or whatever it was called next door to us. So there's a huge fan base for anime stuff and the video games and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to expand into some new areas and pick up some 1/18 stuff. So definitely check them out.
It's a smart move. And so the Hella Dope Toys, the Hella Dope show on Sunday nights. What time?
9:00 Eastern.
So it's usually 6 p.m. Pacific, 9:00 Eastern, usually like right after I do this show, although this one's running like 2 hours and 40 minutes, but hey, it was dope. And you could then check out the Hella Dope show right after. It's one of the many shows that sort of happens right after on Sundays.
And some of my photography is posted on their site as well. So
okay. And Ed does the basically runs the behind the scenes of that show, and often takes over along with Travis, because these two are the Toyleet, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show. Almost 3 months in now. So, and that's over on the Action Figs channel. All of these links are down in that URL and the QR code. Anything. So what's really cool is that you do have a topic. You do a quick run through of the news, and I personally really appreciate your news, because I get, you're doing some stuff that I like, and I love to hear about a lot of the indie stuff, right? Because it's much folks can get information about Hasbro just fine. And you guys really break it down, like doing the whole slides and everything each time, and the music. So I can't even describe it, but you should just go and check out the music, because every single episode is a whole other like experience. And I'm waiting for the choreographed dance videos to come.
We started working out some of the moves Sunday after, or Tuesday after the show. So there is a
Mr. Wonderful dance. It actually is known as that. Yep. So it could be coming to a tube near you.
Okay. And so that's every Tuesday. What time do you guys do that?
9:05.
Okay.
Eastern.
What's with the 05? You and Adam.
So we started at 9, right? That's when we really started the first couple of shows. And we were always running a couple minutes late because we like to just review what we're going to hit the show, like run through the show real quick before we start, right? Because we want a nice, clean show. We want to give our viewers the best show possible.
Yep.
And so we were like, well, let's give us that extra 5 minutes because I always have to top off my coffee cup because I drink coffee all day. Travis usually has to go fill up his water bottle. Gives us that quick second. So 9:05 works.
Okay,
and just has there's a little bit more to it for me beyond just that. As a huge wrestling fan, WCW used to run on Saturday nights on TBS at 6:05 every Saturday. So it always started a couple minutes after. So it was always this like little gimmicky thing they did. So I kind of played with that. And just another update about the show, right? We have our flow, we have our standard segments. We're gonna be introducing some additional things over time, but we've also, the show has its main topic. That's where we spend the majority of the nuts and bolts on the conversation. We try to keep it different, right? Like, because everyone's doing toy reviews. We have our Toyleet or Toylet, which is like our like real quick, like talk about a toy we got, what we think about it. But main topic is really where the nuts and bolts of the show go into every week. But we're actually going to be creating that as a short form. So starting this week, we've exported the 40 minutes of just that show. And, just the main topic. And what we're doing is dropping that every Sunday. So for those that aren't necessarily needing to keep up on news from 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, you can catch a suppressed version, which is just, the 40 minutes of the core topic, which we find that the topics, some of them have really been like informative to folks that have really liked it and enjoyed, some of the insight into like con mastery and things like that. So I think we're going to try that out and see what that is. But we also have a number of other short form stuff we plan to do.
Yeah, so to go back, and I just showing you the intro, like there's a full, it's like a TV show. You guys, even with your little like 80s, 90s sitcom moments introducing each character.
You got it. Thank you.
Totally.
That hits so close to home. Because it like makes me feel so good about it, Brick, because I said to Ed, I was like, we could do something, but I was like, I think of like Family Matters, and I think of like, those TGIF shows that were on, and they always had like the guy looking at the camera, and I gave Ed some ideas, and then he went and did his thing, and I came up with this idea. I was like, what if you like were doing one of your painting gimmicks and you grab up the cup that was accidental and like, oh crap. So yeah.
I love it, man.
It worked out well.
Yeah. And in terms of good. I just want to highlight some of the topics, right? So the idea of the top toy comic crossovers, you talked about toys that have gone to comics and vice versa. The forgotten favorites, I love it, man. And this is where everybody gets in the chat and tells you all the toys that they need, and everybody wants Bionic 6. We know Thundar, Hanna-Barbera, all the ones that I want to, right? So movie merch, how films and TV influence toys, right? So it's cool, like bringing old toys back to life. You showed your flocking stuff.
One of the things Travis and I wanted to do was stick to topics that weren't necessarily covered on a lot of lives, right? Like people go on and they just cover the news, or they cover indie toy lines, or they cover a specific GI Joe or whatever, right? And there's a lot of topics out there that are toy involved in the toy community that just aren't covered, like refurbishing old toys, or toys that we forgot about that were based on some random TV show or cartoon that you just wouldn't think, right? So that was kind of our main goal with this, is to get topics out there that are not the standard toy topics.
I love it, man. It's really cool. It's fun to have a new show, and just to see you guys do your thing. It has been really great. So, and thank you, man, so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having us
on the news, man. I know, we could, we have talked forever, but I know we could go on and on. Savage Cruise. But it is time to go, friends. But hey, thank you both so much for spending so much time with me breaking down the military stuff. I don't know enough about it. So let's do that. No, wait, what does the flower, what does
Toyleet, man.
Okay. Toyleet. All right,
no, not
folks.
toilet.
Yeah. Check back every Sunday, 3:45 p.m. Pacific here for the Brick Something News. I totally don't even know what's happening next week, but I won't be here, but it'll be another pre-recorded. So come through, check it out. Thank you to everyone. Thanks to these guys, Toyleet, for joining me. Enjoy your military toys, all that stuff. And yeah, have a great week, everybody. Good night. Here's where I ended. And let's see if it actually...